The chill that lingered over the wall, the night Sir Alistair Thorne dragged the wildling corpse into Castle Black, slipped on the wind like a warning, riding the storm's ragged breath southward, until it reached the fires atop the night-encircled watchtowers of Dragonstone. There it found Melisandre of Ashai, ruby aglow, as she stood alone upon a precipice of black stone, the surf below clawing at basalt shelves like 1,000 desperate fingers. She closed her eyes and listened, not to the sea or the wind, but to the long sigh that coursed through the flames dancing in iron braziers behind her. Flames that whispered of dead kings and buried truths and a name she had once dismissed as a spent candle. Eddard Stark. The visions had tormented her for 3 days without easing, arriving with the cadence of a heartbeat. Ice, wolf, sword and crown of embers. She had knelt before the painted table and begged R'hllor for clarity, yet every ember leapt to the shape of a direwolf's head, while the wall reared beyond it like a blade of frozen glass. A lesser priestess might have balked, but Melisandre, who had walked into shadow binding deeper than tar, saw certainty in the flames. Eddard Stark was dead, beheaded on Joffrey Baratheon's whim 2 moons past. Yet the fire's truth revealed him kneeling beneath the heart tree at Winterfell, eyes open and living. She felt the weight of destiny tilt upon that image. Stannis Baratheon found her brooding by the sea before dawn. The king's lantern jaw looked carved of iron. The wind flattened his dark hair and bit blood from his lip, yet he did not notice. "You saw something," he said, voice rough as oak. "Does it bode for me? For all?" She replied, shimmering eyes fixed upon a point beyond the horizon. "Roar has shown that the realm's salvation hinges upon a man slain for honor. If he rises, 7 kingdoms may rise with him." Stannis scoffed. "Ned Stark. He bent the knee to my brother Robert when Robert usurped Eris, and he would have crowned my bastard nephew had he lived. What worth has he now? The worth of flame turned to blade." She stepped closer, her red silks rustling like wings. "Beneath the northern sky, light and dark will meet, and the wall will burn a path across the world. For that hour we require the Wolf Lord." Stannis studied her, pupils firing with suspicion. "What fool's errand would carry us to the wall in winter? The north belongs to the boy Robb Stark. Robb Stark's war drowns the realm in blood." She countered. "If his father returns, the boy will bend or break. And if the wolf's head bows to you, all banners will follow. Unite the north, and the fire will sweep south." He looked away toward the pale rim where dawn lurked. "I swore to take King's Landing, and leave the wall unguarded while ice demons stir beyond it." She asked. "Davos says you serve duty, not desire. Your duty lies where the gods send you. Duty." The single coin Stannis could never refuse. By dusk, raven wings carried commands, galleys were provisioned, and the fiery heart of Arlor flapped crimson banners above Dragonstone's keep. Eastwind cut the narrow sea with cold teeth, while Melisandre prayed over coiled ropes and stacks of seasoned pine, for they would soon be pyres. A month's voyage brought them to Eastwatch, the sea gate of the wall, where frosted spray iced every rail, and the garrison's black cloaks gleamed like wet stone. Jon Snow greeted them with the wary poise of a boy trained to suspicion by grief. He had been Lord Commander barely a fortnight, elected upon Jorah Mormont's death, and the burden lay heavy upon him, though he carried it with the quiet resolve of a Stark. "I have heard wild rumors," Jon told Melisandre inside the old shield hall. "Firelight bouncing across walls, hung with cracked shields dulled by frost. They say you would raise my father. Necromancy is no gift. Unburying him would dishonor his memory." She observed how the words father and memory trembled in his throat. "I do not propose necromancy," she said gently. "The great other weaves cold death. I wield R'hllor's fire of life. What was lost can be returned in light." Jon clenched his jaw. Word had reached him of Thoros of Myr breathing fire into Lord Beric's veins. Yet Jon had witnessed how cold reanimation animated Author and Jafer flowers. Fire and ice, which would his father become? Stannis spoke then. "Your realm fragments like dry clay. The Lannisters tighten a noose around every neck south of the neck. Greyjoys raid the western shore. Freys gorge on rivers. Would your father refuse a chance to mend it? Jon bowed his head. If Lord Stark returns, he must have his head. It was mounted on a spike. Melisandre's ruby glimmered, cast in a momentary hush. The fires show a man whole. North of the wall, where the snows carry whispers older than iron, there lies a place called Nightfall's Mirror. There the barrier between life and death thins. If we reach it, we may call him back in the flesh. Not some stitched abomination. Then, Jon's breaths came milk-white between parted lips. He considered the vows tattooed upon his soul, the watch he must not desert. But the wall groaned at night, with the weight of dead kings and unborn terrors, and every gust carried the memory of a father he loved. Then I will guide you, he said. He took them by way of Shadow Pass, a narrow gorge veiled in perpetual dusk even at noon, where black rock rose like fangs around swirling mists. Giant boulders shaped like kneeling men guarded the entrance, and old runestones spoke of forgotten sorcery. Snow sifted in soundless drifts. Ghost padded at Jon's side, red eyes slicing darkness. Behind them clattered Stannis' small retinue of knights, swords muffled beneath leather and wool, while Melisandre walked untouched by cold. The march lasted 3 days, each night colder than the last. They lit no fires. Flames betray wanderers to hungry eyes. But Melisandre's ruby pulsed like a heartbeat, guiding them through labyrinthine ravines and over chasms bridged by pale, natural arches. They saw no wildlings, yet sensed unseen watchers. Once, beneath a sky saturated with stars, they heard horns echo in the far north, long and mournful, as though the night itself signaled intrusion. At dawn on the 4th day, they crested a ridge. Below lay Nightfall's Mirror, a frozen lake so perfectly flat it reflected the slate sky without distortion, creating the illusion of standing between two identical heavens. Dead pines, their trunks stripped white by cold, encircled the basin. At the heart of the ice yawned a single fracture, as though an immense claw had scratched glass. Melisandre knelt upon a ring of charred stones half swallowed by snow, a remnant of an age-old altar. She arranged fresh logs, soaked them in perfumed oil, and traced runes with powdered ruby. Stannis and his men formed a circle at the lake's rim. Jon lingered at the pyre's edge, fingers caressing the wolf-head pommel of Longclaw. "Bring forth the bones," the Red Woman intoned. Stannis signaled, and 2 burly knights hauled a black chest forward. Within lay bones smuggled from King's Landing by devotees of the Lord of Light. Skull, spine, ribs, each bleached and stark. Melisandre's fingertips glided over them, as if reading Braille. Then she nestled them among the logs. Lastly, she slid a battered greatsword, the very blade ice reforged into Joffrey's wretched widow's wail, beside the bones. Its broken edges shone silver. She began to chant in high Valyrian older than the Empire, sonorous syllables that shivered the air. The ruby flared blood-bright, searing the gloom with a pulse that matched the rhythm of her voice. Sparks erupted across the pyre. Logs crackled, caught flame. The blaze illuminated Ned Stark's bones, and shadows contorted across the lake. Jon watched, heart hammering so hard he felt it in his teeth. He tasted snow and salt as tears brimmed. The flames blackened bone, yet ash did not form. The cracks between ribs moltened until glowing marrow bled light. The broken sword quivered, as though remembering its original name. Wind roared across the basin, swirling snow into devouring columns. The fracture in the ice widened with a thunderous crack, unveiling ink-dark water below. Steam rose, curling serpentine. In it, Jon glimpsed spectral faces, direwolves, dire crows, weirwood eyes weeping red sap, until all dissolved in blinding white. When the light faded, the pyre collapsed inward, revealing a man curled at its center. Frost steamed off naked skin. Smoke coiled around black hair streaked with gray. Jon staggered forward. Even upon his knees he recognized the bony plane of the face, the solemn mouth, the scar across right shin from a training yard accident. Tales his father once told. "Father," he whispered, voice cracking open like ice. Eddard Stark opened his eyes. They were the gray of dawn over Winterfell, and they focused on Jon with aching familiarity. His breath plumed. His gaze slipped to Stannis, then Melisandre, then the wall visible beyond ridges. The sentinel he'd sworn to defend decades ago. His hand reached for the shattered sword. Edges glimmered until they knit seamlessly, the steel mending with a sound like bell chimes in summer. "Ice," he murmured. Melisandre's smile dimmed the stars. "Light and shadow made flesh," she said. "Rise, Lord Stark." But rising was agony. Muscles remembered the axe. His neck remembered the blade. He wavered, saved only by Jon's arms. Stannis extended a cloak. Eddard wrapped it around his shoulders, bewildered by its warmth. By the world's weight, memory clanged. The sept of Baelor, Sansa's tears, Joffrey's spite. Yet here he stood, in frost-deep wild. Stannis spoke solemnly. "I am Stannis Baratheon, rightful king. I ask your allegiance." Eddard regarded him. Duty shaped his life, and he would serve rightful blood if proven. But in his heart, Winterfell beckoned. Children scattered, wife imprisoned, son bleeding in the riverlands. He looked to Jon. "I must see my family," he said. "Then we march south," Stannis declared. Their journey back to the wall carried whispers of dread. Rangers who saw Ned stagger into Castle Black muttered of whites before falling silent beneath the gaze of his living eyes. Some knelt, stunned. Samwell Tarly's quill slipped from numb fingers. Ravens croaked as though recalling the stark words. "Winter is coming." Ned spent nights before the weirwood in the grove, seeking the old god's counsel. He felt changed. Each heartbeat echoed with distant flame and chilling emptiness. He thanked Melisandre, yet shunned her insistence he was Azor Ahai reborn. He was only a man, one who had failed his wife, his king, his people. The gods had returned him, so he must not fail again. Stannis addressed the Black Brothers, invoking oaths to defend the realm from burgeoning darkness. He named Jon Snow his true-born heir, citing Robb Stark's coronation as a rebellion while the realm needed unity. The Watch grumbled. Kings and heirs were not their concern, yet they held tongues when Ned told them winter would freeze their bones if men did not join hands. Melisandre's ravens flew to the north, east, and south. Word that Lord Eddard lived swept the kingdoms like wildfire in a dry summer. Many called it heresy. The faith of the Seven decried blasphemy. Lannisters laughed. But in Winterfell's burned shell, held by Theon then by the Boltons, small folk whispered prayers. In Riverrun, Catelyn wept, certain it was rumor, until a raven bearing Ned's own seal, and the memory of his writing hand, landed upon Robb Stark's arm. Robb camped at the twins, still reeling from the insult of Walder Frey. His mother unfurled Ned's letter beside lamplight. The words trembled as though written by trembling heartstrings. He read them thrice before the letter slipped from numbed fingers. "If father lives," he murmured, "then my crown is folly." The direwolf gray wind bristled, sensing turning fates. Robb dispatched riders to every lord sworn to him. Recall banners, hold positions, await orders. He dared not abandon oaths lightly. Yet his father's pen outweighed his sword. In the Westerlands, Tyrion Lannister received the news at Harrenhal, where he served as provisional hand after Tywin took Casterly Rock to muster defenses. Tyrion's mind raced. A living Stark would rattle the Iron Throne's brittle legitimacy, for he alone knew King Joffrey's bastardy was true. If Ned Stark marched south with Stannis, he might reveal that secret and topple the Golden Lions. Tyrion wrote urgent ravens to King's Landing. "Brace for storms." Cersei dismissed them. "Dead men don't rise," she scoffed. Yet at night she dreamt of headless corpses stalking the Red Keep. Joffrey ordered the spike where Ned's skull had once rested scrubbed of rust. Across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen, mother of dragons, heard word in Qarth. To her, a resurrected Stark mattered little, but a realm uniting behind him threatened her claim. She traced maps beneath swaying lamps, pondering alliances she might seize before Westeros closed ranks. While letters soared, Ned Stark gathered men at the wall. Val, the wildling princess, granted safe passage through wildling settlements newly sworn to Jon Snow. Giants watched them cross tundra. Mammoths trumpeted from distant hills. Ned spoke to Mance Rayder in a clearing of ghost-white birches, recounting how the White Walkers stirred. Mance, recalling Hardhome's screams, agreed to guide his people south, swearing truce to any crown that defended all men from death's blue eyes. Thus a strange host gathered at Queen's Crown: Black Brothers, Free Folk, Northern Spears, and Baratheon Knights. Yet they lacked numbers to challenge Lannisters in the field. Ned proposed they march to Winterfell, reclaim his seat, and rally Lords true. Stannis objected. Time lost was power lost. But Ned countered that the North's loyalty lay with him, and with northern strength, they could sweep south. On the first day of the new moon, their columns snaked through the Wolfswood. Mist veiled branches. Ravens flitted branch to branch, cawing warnings. At Molestown, small folk fled cellars cheering, while Craster's daughters whispered of old gods stirring. The host crossed the last river on barges lashed from pine trunks. Bolton banners flew above Winterfell. Flayed men on Pink Field. Ramsay Snow, bastard of Bolton, commanded the garrison, reveling in charred halls. But Dreadman quailed when word spread of a living lord, riding at the head of impossible allies. Some deserted, others barricaded gates. Ramsay laughed, promising to flay the walking corpse and wear his skin. The siege lasted hours. Stannis catapults hurled flaming pitch. Wildling archers harried ramparts. The giant 1-1 smashed oaken doors. Ned had sworn to avoid needless death. Winterfell must not burn again. Yet Ramsay's malice forced their hand. They breached the gatehouse at dusk. Snow-laden smoke choked courtyards. Ned himself climbed the narrow steps of the broken tower, ice reborn shining in hand, to confront Ramsay. The bastard wielded twin daggers, eyes gleaming with feral delight. "Father's pet wolf returns from the grave," he jeered. "Shall I send you back?" But Ned fought with the silent grace of a snowfall. He parried, riposted, and disarmed Ramsay in a handful of heartbeats. When edge met throat, Ramsay spat. "Flay me, Stark. Prove no man escapes the North's cruelty." "I am no Bolton," Ned said. He ordered Ramsay chained to face justice before the lords of the North. After the banners of the flayed man were pulled down and burned, Ned entered the Godswood. He knelt before the heart tree and pressed forehead to its rough bark. Tears left pale trails. He felt the old god's presence like roots threading wounded soil, drinking hope. He prayed for lost souls. Sir Roderick slain, Maester Luwin, the children scattered like leaves. When he rose, Robb stepped into the clearing. Father and son regarded each other through flickering torchlight. Robb's eyes brimmed with disbelief and desperate yearning. They embraced fiercely, Robb shaking with remembered grief. "Forgive me, Father," he whispered. "I reached for a crown when I should have reached for you." Ned held him. "You led as you believed just. There is no fault in that." Lords assembled in the great hall, many kneeling to the resurrected Lord, some gazing in half fear at the Red Witch, whose flames had wrought this miracle. Great John Umber's booming laugh cracked rafters. "The North remembers," he shouted, and mead splashed over beards. Yet not all were swayed. House Bolton's vassals clamored for Ramsay's release. Men who'd prospered from the Red Wedding balked at Ned's leniency. To them he declared a council at dawn. Each lord must choose the realm's fate, continue feuds or pledge to a greater war looming beyond them. That night, Melisandre stood beside Ned atop the battlements. "The dawn comes," she whispered. "But with dawn rides darkness deeper than night. You must be the sword in the darkness, Lord Stark." Ned stared northward, where the aurora painted silent curtains of green. "I am only a man. You are light made flesh," she insisted. "You must wield fire as you wield honor." Within the castle's crypts, Jon Snow placed candles before the statues of Stark kings. Ghost's white shape moved like smoke between stone pillars. Jon's heart warred between joy and dread. Joy that his father breathed again. Dread that fate had plucked Ned from death, only to forge him into some burning weapon. Would the father he loved survive such forging? Robb joined him, the brothers clasping forearms in silent accord. War had tested them, yet blood endured. Robb spoke of the Riverland's despair, of Frey treachery festering like pus. Jon recounted the white shadows that killed with blue flames. They realized every petty score paled beside the heartless cold advancing from the north. Dawn's council assembled in the great hall. Ned sat upon the high seat, Stannis at his right, Melisandre flanking. Lords crowded benches, Umbers, Manderleys, Karstarks, Glovers, Ryswolds, even Lady Mage Mormont glowering with bear-like pride. Ramsay, shackled, knelt before them. Ned addressed all. Winter is here. The others stir beyond the wall. I have seen what doom they herald. If we bicker, we die. I ask each of you, will you stand with me, with King Stannis, to defend the living? Ben? Murmurs rippled. Lord Wyman Manderley rose, his girth barely contained in sealskin cloak. I swore fealty to Robb as king in the north, he said. Yet if our ancient lord stands before us, I would follow him to hell. And I, thundered Grey Jon. Others echoed until the hall quaked. The Karstarks hesitated. Rickard Karstark remembered his executed sons. But Ned met his gaze and said, I know grief well. Let us not heap more corpses upon our hearts. Rickard, tears bright upon cheeks, nodded. Ned turned to Ramsay. Your crimes are legion. Yet I will not spill blood for vengeance alone. You will take the black. Serve the realm you tormented. Ramsay snarled, but Ned signaled guards. The bastard was dragged away. Fate sealed. Some lords grumbled. Blood demanded blood. But Ned's clemency was a promise to forsake old hatreds. Thus the North bent knee to Eddard Stark, and through him, to Stannis Baratheon. Ravens flew south again, announcing an alliance none had foreseen. Wolf and stag reborn in flame. At Moat Cailin, Ironborn who'd occupied the ruins found themselves besieged by a host they believed scattered. Theon Greyjoy, captive of Ramsay no longer, stood broken among them. But Ned's return stirred memory of honor in him. He opened the gates, yielding the causeway. Ned took Theon's sword, then offered it back. Earn this, he said. The unified host pressed into the neck, where Crannogman guided them through bogs. Reed warriors whispered of Jojen's visions. A dire wolf blazing like dawn, a stag crowned in red, an army of snow-dead men. Autumn's last leaves fell as they crossed the Trident. Small folk emerged from hovels to line roads, marveling at the wolf lord arisen. Ned's hair had whitened at temples. His gaze bore both sorrow and iron. Yet when he spoke to peasants, asking after their children, blessing their fields, hope sprang like green shoots. In Riverrun, Catelyn waited on the drawbridge as banners approached. She feared a conjurer's lie, yet the man who dismounted wore the smile that had once calmed her stormy heart. She rushed into his arms, sobbing. Ned whispered apologies for every pain she had borne. Robb knelt before them, crown in hand, offering it. Ned set the circlet upon Robb's brow anew. I am no king, Ned said, voice carrying across battlements. I am father, lord, and sword, but kingship must answer for peace. Robb, kneel beside me. Robb knelt. Stannis stepped forward, great cloak slapping in wind. Ned placed Robb's hand within Stannis. North and south join. Pledge swords to rid the land of shadow. Robb swore fealty. Stannis accepted, though lines of doubt softened upon his stern face. Then let us ride for King's Landing, Stannis declared. The Riverlords gathered, Edmure Tully, Brynden Blackfish, Lords Piper, Vance, Mallister. They pledged men. Edmure burned to avenge ruin wrought by Lannisters. Brynden whispered cunning paths along the Blackwater. But before marching south, Ned demanded parley at the twins. Walder Frey feigned sickness, fearing retribution, yet could not deny an invitation backed by 20,000 spears. Ned had crossed the bridge, flanked by Robb and Greatjon. He addressed the Lord of the Crossing. "I come not for blood but for oaths. You betrayed us. Swear again, and you may keep your seat. Betray us once more, and I will see the twins crumble." And now Walder, faces wrinkled as old parchment, trembled beneath Ned's gaze. He swore, though the words tasted of dust. An alliance forged in second chances felt fragile, yet Ned believed fear of something greater. The ice to come would bind even Freys. On the march along the King's Road, news arrived. Renly's ghost-wielding flaming sword had appeared at Storm's End, frightening garrison into surrender. Melisandre smiled knowingly. Her puppet illusion sowed confusion among Baratheon's enemies. Meanwhile, Tyrion Lannister fortified King's Landing, dredging Blackwater, hoarding wildfire. Ned knew the city intimately. The Red Keep's secrets, the hidden passages beneath the Sept, the Gold Cloak's fickle loyalty. He dispatched ravens to Sir Barristan Selmy, exiled yet honorable, entreating him to claim justice. Selmy agreed to sail from Braavos with Sellsword Company of the Silver Moon. Before they reached the capital, Lannister outriders ambushed at dawn near the Rosurrected. The Battle of Ash Slope erupted. Crimson banners against Direwolf and Fiery Heart. Eddard led the center, ice cleaving through gilded helms. Melisandre atop a hill chanting as arrows ignited mid-flight, trailing comets of fire. Stannis' discipline combined with northern fury broke Jaime Lannister's line. Jaime himself dueled Robb, their blades ringing across field of burning roses, until Grey Wind's howl spooked Jaime's horse. Captured, the Kingslayer knelt before the man he had once called friend. Ned accepted his sword. But victory cost blood. The Greatjon took a mace to ribs. Mance Rayder's shoulders split. Giants felled by scorpions. Ned walked among the wounded, binding stumps with his own cloak, his heart stretching to bursting with each dying whisper. War's toll never lessened. At last, the host encamped upon Blackwater Rush. The Red Keep's crimson towers glowed in sunset. Inside, madness brewed. Joffrey ordered captives slain. Cersei stalked wildfire beneath city streets. Tyrion paced ramparts calculating. The people starved. Ned proposed a siege to starve the Lannisters into surrender, but Stannis urged assault while Tyrell and Martell allegiances remained undecided. Melisandre whispered that only blood would break the darkness within those walls. She urged Ned to wield wildfire as a purging flame. He refused. Fire consumed innocents as readily as foes. Instead, he penned secret letters to Tyrion, offering prisoner exchanges and promise of fair trial, appealing to the dwarf's pragmatic heart. Tyrion responded with veiled warnings. Wildfire caches were primed. One spark could turn the city to green hell. He counseled negotiation with the small council to replace Cersei and Joffrey with Tommen under Stark Baratheon regency. Ned recognized the value. He had once promised to spare Cersei if she fled. Now he offered safe exile to the queen and her eldest if surrender came quickly. But Cersei would not yield. She trusted her alchemist's fire and believed prophecy named her children's doom. Spurring madness, as diplomatic ravens flew, an early winter storm rolled across Blackwater Bay, bending masts and shredding pennants. Lightning forked over spires, igniting wildfire barrels in the city's bowels. Plumes of emerald blossomed, devouring Flea Bottom and tearing chunks from the city wall. Panic seized defenders. Tyrion, horrified, dragged Joffrey from ramparts and struck him when he protested. At dawn, clouds of green smoke choked the harbor. Ned saw gates sagging, gold cloaks deserting. He ordered his forces to advance, but only to break chains and open corridors for fleeing smallfolk. Wildlings guided citizens northward under the watch of Night's Watch Rangers, a sight that might have seemed absurd months prior. Inside the Red Keep, Mad Queen Cersei barred herself with Joffrey in Maegor's Holdfast. Jaime, released by Ned to parley, confronted her. Years of twisted love curdled overnight. He chose his brother over his sister, opening the Holdfast as doors to Ned's honor guard. Cersei shrieked that witchfires would consume them all, but the wildfire stores were spent. She attempted to slit Tommen's throat. Jaime's sword stopped her. Ned stepped through doors, cloak of direwolf gray swirling. He faced Circe, gaunt, eyes rimmed in red, and raised no sword. "This realm suffers, my lady. Will you yield?" She spat, but the fight had flown. She collapsed beside Joffrey's sullen form, weeping. Ned ordered them taken into gentle custody, for chaining lions tight enough to prevent further mauling. On the throne, he did not sit. Stannis entered, gaping throng parting. Yet before king and subject could speak, Melisandre strode forward, ruby blazing. "The usurper is cast down," she proclaimed. "Behold the one true king, Stannis of House Baratheon, Lightbringer in hand." She pressed a sword newly forged in gleaming crimson into his grip. Stannis raised it, but its glow was reflected wildfire. Ned knelt first, setting precedent. Lords followed. Tyrell envoys, Martell princes, even ironborn emissaries lured by Theon's pleas for peace. 7 kingdoms bent in one hall. Yet Stannis' eyes turned to the north where winter hung. In White Harbor, ravens spoke of dead armies breaching the shivering sea's frozen coasts. In the Vale, Lady Erin's maester recorded snow thick as stone, and blue-eyed corpses trudging mountain passes. Ned knew victory in King's Landing meant nothing if the world died in endless night. Thus, on the night Stannis was crowned in the ruined Great Sept, rubble strewn with fallen crystals, Ned Stark stood beside him and proclaimed the true war had only begun. He urged every house, every creed, every faith to unite. The throne meant less than a single candle against the darkness. Only together could they kindle a pyre bright enough to rival dawn. As horns blew across the city, not in triumph but in warning, Melisandre's fires painted omen upon black sky. A direwolf roaring beside a crowned stag, both wrapped in ribbons of scarlet flame. And far beyond, across winds howling beneath a moonless heaven, the ancient cold stirred, its hunger mounting, for ice remembered fire, and death remembered those who defied it. Wind shrieked along the scorched rafters of the Great Sept long after the crowning, funneling through broken rose windows, as though the mother herself tried to draw breath to warn her children. Ned felt each gust as a cold fingertip against the back of his neck. He had stood watch atop Winterfell's battlements in gales that could peel skin, yet the air tonight carried a deeper chill, not of weather but of fate, humming in his reborn bones like a tuning fork struck by unseen hands. He lingered behind while the lords dispersed, letting the noise of their squabbling fade down corridors where shattered marble crunched beneath hurried boots. Torches guttered, their light skittered over frescoes peeled by heat of wildfire. The sept smelled of burned incense and fear. From somewhere distant, a child cried. One of the thousands evacuated from flea bottom to bakeries, cellars and sept crypts, now repurposed as shelters. Ned knelt, not to pray but to run fingers across a floor tile scorched black and bubbling. Stone should not blister under ordinary flame. Only alchemists' wildfire or dragonfire could do this to granite. He thought of Daenerys Targaryen across the sea and wondered which fire would reach Westeros quicker, hers or the white kindling shuffling south behind a wall of storm. Footsteps echoed. Jon Snow emerged from the nave's shadows, ghost pacing silent at his heel. The direwolf's red eyes gleamed as they caught Ned's scent. He chuffed softly and brushed his massive head beneath Ned's hand. Jon's face bore new lines of exhaustion etched since dawn, when they'd shepherded rivers of refugees through cracked gates. "Stannis convenes his war council at first light," Jon said. "Sir Davos rides hard for Storm's End to fetch their ships up the coast. Queen Cersei and Joffrey are locked in Maegor's Tower under the guard of the unsullied company that arrived with Selmy, of all surprises. The small folk chant your name in the streets. They believe you've come to save them." Ned almost laughed, but his throat was too tight. "I have never saved anyone by myself, least of all the realm. The realm saved me, brought me back, with whatever bargain Melisandre struck with her god. We'll need more than miracles to stop what comes." Jon touched Icicle, the Valyrian dagger he'd taken off a dead white in the haunted forest, now sheathed at his belt. More than dragon glass daggers and Valyrian steel. More than all the steel in the world, Ned murmured. He gestured to smashed altars. This began as a war of kings and ended as children burning their own city. When the cold dead march, will gold lions and mockingbirds stand beside us? Will Freys hold their bridges or collapse them beneath our feet? Joan's eyes searched the darkness where moonlight spilled through open roof beams. We stood beside wildlings and giants outside Winterfell. Who's to say old enemies cannot become shield brothers when every breath is threatened? Hope, Ned answered, is forged like steel, folded through pain until it holds an edge. He rose, joints popping. Come. The city reeks of smoke. Let's taste night air that has not yet soured. Now, they walked the perimeter of Aegon's Hill along parapets half crumbled from wildfire explosions. Below, Blackwater Bay lapped at charred hulks still smoldering. The stench was hideous, but the wind from the north muted it with colder scents, pine resin, distant snow. Ned imagined that wind as a vast breath exhaled by mountains white with age. Blowing south a tale none wanted to hear. A torch bobbed ahead, Brienne of Tarth, armor dented, face bruised, escorting Sansa from hidden chambers of the Red Keep. Sansa's eyes, God's those eyes, fixed on her father as if afraid he'd vanish like morning mist. She ran the final steps, and Ned folded her into his arms, marveling that she had grown taller than he remembered. Hair auburn like parted sunset clouds. I prayed every night, she whispered. I told the old gods if they gave you back, I would never doubt them. And they answered, Ned said, voice thick. Yet he sensed Melisandre's ruby flicker in that answer, and he wondered how many prayers of others had gone unheard. Sansa welcomed Jon with a trembling kiss to his cheek. Murmuring brother, though truth of his birth still locked behind Ned's teeth. Not tonight, he thought. Let simple joys live unshadowed a little longer. Brienne spoke. Your grace. She faltered, unsure what title to use. Forgive me. King Stannis requests Lady Sansa housed within the Red Keep for her protection. The city is restless. It is not the city that concerns me, Ned said. Danger carries a lion's name. Sir Jaime is watched, Brienne replied. Sir Barristan's unsullied answered to him and to me until the small council reconvenes, and I would stake my life. She paused, glancing at Sansa. I already have many times. You have my trust, Ned said simply. Brienne's lank shoulders straightened as if he'd knighted her then and there. Sansa begged leave to rest, promising to visit at first light. Ned watched her escort vanish down winding stairs. He had reclaimed one child. 4 more scattered across war-torn kingdoms and seas. Bran and Rickon rumored dead. Arya last seen disguised as a cupbearer escaping Harrenhal. Robb camped by the Rush, still nursing wounds of the Ash Slope. One family knit together by a resurrected thread. Could it hold? Jon leaned on the battlement. If ice wraiths cross the neck, they'll funnel straight to this hill or Storm's End, or both. But they can't cross ocean. Dragonstone might serve as fallback. Ned stroked Ghost's fur. Winterfell must stand as first bulwark. Brandon the Builder raised the wall, but Stark blood steeled his will. If Winterfell falls, the rest of Westeros may flee to islands. But it will only delay oblivion. Then, Jon's shadow merged with the direwolves. Then let's ride north tomorrow. Ned pictured thousands of refugees camped beyond the city walls, starving. The Crown's grain stores pillaged by Lannisters, Tyrell harvests still stuck behind siege lines. I sail north, not ride, and bring these people with me. If they remain here, they'll die of cold or hunger or each other. Jon raised an eyebrow. Ships enough. Stannis owns the royal fleet now, Ned said, but not its hearts. Sailors fear the cold as much as they fear drownings. We'll need something else to coax them. Then? By sunrise, white gulls wheeled above quays jammed with half-burned carracks. Dromons, cogs lashed mastless. Davos Seaworth, sleeves rolled, oversaw repairs, cursing under his breath about pitch shortages and barnacles thick as Lannister lies. When Ned approached beside Jon, Davos stopped barking orders. My lord, Davos greeted. Or should I say, my miracle. Just Ned, Ned said. Miracles leave men uneasy. We must give them plainer reasons to follow. Davos scratched salt and pepper beard. Plain, as in grain, coin, or honor. All three. Ned surveyed the chaos. The Riverland still harvests some wheat. Lady Manderley promised White Harbor's stores. The Iron Bank covets stability more than interest. If we secure loans, we can pay sailors fair wage and feed those we transport. Davos' grin showed the gap where 4 fingers used to be. You talk like a hand who means to serve. John smirked. Hay has 2 good hands for it. Ned winced but did not deny. Stannis will name Davos' hand. I have counseled it. I will serve as Lord Marshal of the North until this war ends or I do. My place is Winterfell. And Davos' sea-green eyes glinted like sunlit waves. Then let me be your quartermaster till we reach White Harbor. After that, God's willing, you'll have a second front of ships bringing grain south while our armies march north. Across the harbor, Melisandre ascended gangplank of the Black Betha, slim form haloed by a dawn too pale to warm. Sailors made signs against evil, yet none dared obstruct her. She had become a walking fable, and fables frightened men into discipline. John muttered, when she boards a ship with that ruby blazing, I feel we've strapped wildfire within the hull. Ned couldn't disagree. Yet he had seen her rekindle life, for good or ill. Perhaps she could do the same to courage. 3 days later, 32 ships laden with 9,000 small folk, 2,000 northern spears, 500 unsullied, and nearly 1,000 wildlings weighed anchor under a full moon. Dragon's breath fog drifted over waves, shimmering silver. Ned stood at the prow of the Wind's Grace, Davos' own bark, watching King's Landing shrink. Stannis remained behind with the main host to solidify rule, root out Lannister loyalists, and ride later by King's Road. Jon leaned on rail, cloak whipped by sea wind. Ghost lounged between coils of rope, tongue lolling. Gilly sat nearby with her son Sam, wide-eyed at endless water. 2 giants occupied the main deck of the Stormcaller, its timbers groaning but somehow not splintering. Everywhere languages mingled. Northern burrs, free folk growls, SOC accents. It sounded like a scattered realm sewing itself back together. Ned allowed himself a spark of hope. Far to east, thunderheads bruised the horizon. Melisandre gazed at them as though reading script upon a titanic scroll. When Ned approached, she said, 2 storms converge. One of sky, one of shadow. They will meet at the Dreadfort. Bolton's seat. Ned frowned. We left Roose untouched at the Twins. He'll never allow our passage north unchallenged. He will not oppose you. She murmured. He prepares to flee. But storms seldom heed cowards' feet. Something else gathers in those halls. Jon had joined, overhearing. If Ramsay's father plots with the others, Boltons worship only their own flaying knives. Ned interrupted, though unease coiled in his gut. He remembered Roose's pale eyes and how they slid away from heat of hearths. Whatever dwells at the Dreadfort, we'll face it. The voyage north proved mercifully swift. Great whales surfaced alongside hulls, exhaling spouts like bursting kettles. Children squealed. Wildlings knotted harpoons until Jon convinced them slaughtering a sacred sea ghost would bring storms. Melisandre spent long hours alone, hands over brazier, muttering names no one recognized. At White Harbor, the Wind's Grace entered the swift-flowing mouth of the White Knife, sails snapping. Lord Wyman Manderley waited upon the quay, clad in sealskin cloak lined with snowy ermine. When Ned disembarked, Manderley fell to both knees despite difficulty of rising later. My lord, he boomed, the Merman's court offers bread and salt to every soul you bring. Be he crow, free folk or giant. The North's hearth burns for all now. Ned clasped forearms. Your welcome will be storied. He gestured behind. These folk saw King's Landing burn green. They have earned respite. Manderley barked orders, and dock workers guided streams of weary travelers toward warehouses converted into dormitories. Barrels of salted cod cracked open. Ovens belched heat. The harbor smelled of yeast and sea. Ned realized only then how gaunt many faces looked. Skin stretched over bone like parchment. Jon helped direct Unsullied to perimeter guard posts. Grey Worm saluted him silently. Ghost sniffed at spearmen, decided they belonged, wandered off to terrorize gulls. That night, feasting inside the Newcastle's Great Hall, Ned sat between Manderley and Lyanna Mormont. Fiery-eyed girl lady who spoke as though grown thrice her size. She promised every remaining Bear Islander would stand on Winterfell's walls. "The dead won't frighten us," she said. "Not when we've a wolf returned from corpsehood leading the charge." Ned almost choked on meat at that phrasing. Lyanna merely grinned, cheeks apple-rosy above her furs. Singers performed an old Skagosi dirge that told of snow giants and moon spirits. Melisandre slipped in, listening with half-closed eyes. When the last note faded, she called for silence. "Erlor shows me rivers of blood freezing in veins of stone." She said, "Before the full moon wanes twice, the wall will break." Voices rose. Fear rippled. Ned stood. "Then we'll mend it with flesh and fire. Tomorrow we march to Winterfell. From there we ride to the wall with every hammer, chain, and torch we possess." The hall thundered with cups striking tables. Yet Ned caught Lord Manderley's frown. Grain stores already pinched. Marching north with refugees behind would bleed resources. But there was no other path. They left White Harbor under banners of Direwolf and Fiery Heart. Columns of carts creaked over the King's Road, ribboned between snow-dusted birches. At their head rode Ned, Jon, Davos, and Val. Giants stomped rear guard, clearing drifts by tearing up saplings. Scouts ranged ahead. Mira Reed darting swamp to swamp, a one-eyed Tormund Giantsbane bellowing that snow never birthed a man he couldn't kiss or kill. On the fifth night, campfires flickered along Serwyn's fields. Ned pored over maps by lamplight in his pavilion. Jon entered, pale. Scouts returned. Dreadfort banners approach under cover of dark. Now. Ned's jaw tightened. Roose? They say. His men carried torches but no sigils, only flayed skins hung over spears. Ned's blood chilled. He ordered horns. Knights scrambled into mail. Wildlings brandished stolen iron. Torches highlighted breaths whirling white. The enemy advanced across fields lit by pink dawn. Dozens first, then hundreds in lockstep silent phalanx. Bolton soldiers, yet their gait unnatural. Faces pale blue under half-helmets. Eyes like polished sapphires. Flayed skins draped shoulders but did not flutter. The flesh frozen stiff. Ned's stomach dropped. "They're dead." Jon drew Longclaw. Bolton gave his men to the others. Melisandre appeared, ruby blazing. He flayed them alive. Hung them in crypt of his castle. Cold found them there. A hollow horn groaned among the Bolton ranks, a note that seemed to scrape marrow from bones. The dead broke into charge. Ned shouted orders. "Dragonglass arrows!" Manderley archers loosed black shafts tipped with translucent obsidian mined on dragonstone. Where they struck, whites shattered, limbs severed in sprays of frost. Wildlings hurled firepots. Black brothers formed shield walls. Into that maelstrom Ned plunged atop his grey destrier, ice gleaming. Each swing clove rotting flesh, yet shards of cold reformed around sinew, reanimating. Only dragonglass ended them permanently. Behind him, Davos toppled one with spear of daylight steel, and shattered its skull with boot. Jon and Ghost fought as twin storms, sword whirling, wolf tearing throats. But for every white felled, two replaced it. Above ridge, a pale rider emerged. Tall, armored in shards of ice, antlered helm crown-like. A Knight's King Lieutenant, or worse. Blue flames burned in its gauntlets. Shaping a spear of solid frost, Melisandre strode forward. She drew from beneath cloak a dull dagger. Lightbringer's twin? She carved her own palm. Blood dripped scarlet into snow. Steaming, she flung droplets toward the rider, chanting words that made Ned's ears ring. Fire burst along snow, forming a ring around the rider that hissed like sizzling fat. Ice spear cracked. Rider screeched in language older than trees, then turned steed and vanished into swirling flurries. Without its marshal, the dead lines wavered. John howled, "Advance!" Northern infantry surged, smashing disoriented corpses. By mid-morning, only smoldering heaps remained. Silence fell. Snowflakes drifted upon field painted with pitch, ash, and black-red blood. Ned dismounted numb. Squads gathered fallen, 8 northern men, 15 free folk. 2 giants lay still. Among them was one, arrows of ice studding his chest. The giant's final breath had melted snow in wide circle, steaming like a hot spring now cooling to slate. "We can't fight battles like this every league," Davos muttered, eyes dark. John knelt beside a dead Night's Watch ranger whose face he recognized from Eastwatch. Coral. He pulled the man's pass token, closed eyes. "We need dragons," Ned exhaled. "Or we need to become them." By dusk, their weary host approached the dread fort. Towers of pink stone glowered above a frozen moat. No banners flew. Gates yawed open. Ned led scouts across drawbridge dusted with snow that looked like sprinkled salt on raw meat. Inside courtyard, bodies. Bolton household, guard, servants, stable boys. Lay flayed then frozen. Skinless muscles petrified mid-scream. Snow settled into cavities where eyes once were. In hall, they found Roose Bolton, slumped on his own high seat, throat opened ear to ear, his son Ramsay's former dagger protruding still, carved on his chest in bloody runes. "I return for the last kiss." Ned stared unblinking. John whispered, "He killed himself. Or something killed him and wrote prophecy in his blood." Ned forced himself to turn away. Behind throne, a passage led down spiraling stairs into crypt of stone tables. There he found racks of torture devices, and alongside them, an empty stone slab rimed with frost. Chains lay cracked, as if imprisoned corpse had broken free. One perfect circle of ice remained, still steaming in ginger-scented air. No, not ginger. Human flame grease. Melisandre's voice echoed from gloom. Here he sought to bargain. He thought offering flesh to cold would spare him. The dark does not bargain. Now. Ned cheeks flushed hot in spite of cold. "Burn it. Every inch." Throughout night, pyres blazed within courtyards. Flames upheld no celebration, only purging. Smoke towered into moonless sky, twisting like a signal to watchers beyond mortal range. Morning revealed soot-blackened ruin, but the host gained fresh allies. A few surviving kennel masters who denounced Bolton cruelty, a dozen House Hornwood archers imprisoned for resisting Ramsay, and a treasure, casks of fine Myrish oil, perfect for wildfire-like firepots. The march to Winterfell took 2 more days. Haunted by frost specters and charred memories, men hardly spoke. Then, as the dawn of 3rd day paled, they saw Winterfell's walls rising from drifting snow. Chimneys smokeless, yet not broken. Green of the Gods' Wood peaked above ramparts. Ned's breath snagged. He had walked these stones since boyhood. Now he returned twice born. When the gates swung open, Robb greeted them on a black stallion, flanked by Grey Wind and Lady Mage Mormont. On shaggy Garin, behind, banners of every North house snapped. Hardwon unity physically manifested. Robb rode forward to clasp his father's arm. "You outrun ravens," Robb said. "We thought Bolton mustered between us." Rumors reached of walking corpses. "More truth than rumor," Ned replied. Snow melted on Robb's pauldrons, leaving bright drops. "Stannis marches behind us with main strength. We must ready walls to host double our number, store crops and smith dragonglass tips until fingers bleed." Robb's expression shifted, steel slipping beneath skin. Manderley sent lime barges up the White Knife. "We'll line inner wall with burning troughs of pitch. Every smith works bellows day and night." "And Maester Lewin?" His voice cracked, remembering the old maester's grave. "Maester Walken now oversees Ravenry." Within Winterfell's courtyard, bells tolled to signal return. Small folk lined inner ward, some weeping to see Ned dismount. He embraced old Sergeant Harwin, padded shoulders of stable girl Brella grown tall. He walked the yard, reacquainting himself with every stone. He paused at charred spot where Bran fell, at cracked well where Arya once balanced on rim, at smithy where Rickon had chased Shaggy Dog in circles. Each memory a knife, each knife a stitch closing wound. That evening the High Lords feasted in the great hall, freshly whitewashed to cover Bolton's scorch marks. Entire pig turned on spit, barrels of Manderley ale uncorked, but hearts remained somber. Ghost lay by hearth, giants hunkered outside walls too large for hall. Ned rose in flicker of torchlight. Darkness hunts us. Days ahead will carve songs of terror or of triumph. Hours decide which. I ask each man, woman, and child to pledge not to me but to each other. The wall must hold. For that, we require pickaxes, mortar, dragon glass, and a courage that does not crack. Then Psau. He gestured to galley master perched beside Davos. Tomorrow we send ships west to the Three Sisters, east to Skagos, south to Gulltown, to bear warnings. Manderley merchants will ferry small folk here. The harvest from the Reach will travel by river to White Harbor, escorted by Unsullied. Roars of agreement rolled like thunder. Yet one voice cut above. Mira Reed. We've news from Greywater Watch. She stepped forward, face smudged with swamp loam. My father sent dream sleep. Bran lives, beyond the wall. He rides with a giant elk, she said, eyes shining with fervor. Jojen saw him beneath a heart tree that bleeds evergreen flame. He heads to a place called the Dawn Cradle. Ned gripped table for balance. Alive, wife. His boy, paralyzed, now north of the dead. Melisandre gazed across hall, ruby, pulsing. The three-eyed wolf. If he reaches Dawn Cradle, he may open a gate for light, or for shadow. Ned's heart thundered. Then I'll bring him home. Jon objected instantly yet softly. You are needed here. I was needed here before. I failed then, Ned replied. I will not again. He lifted eyes to Hall. But I will not ride alone. I need a small company. Rangers who know the haunted woods, wildlings who know the caves, giants who brave cold. He looked at Tormund, Val, Mira, even to Lyanna Mormont, who slammed fist to breastplate. Robb said, You ride beyond my reach, father. Give me leave to hold Winterfell, and the wall in your stead. Pride blossomed. Ned clasped Robb's shoulder. You are Winterfell now. Within 3 days, while smiths forged arrowheads of dragonglass, while Davos scribes penned grain chits, while wildling children shook fleas from gifted blankets, Nan's ranging company gathered at the Hunter's Gate. Jon joined against Ned's protests. Davos commanded supply lines west. Melisandre surprised all by declaring she too would ride, for her fire must confront darkness at its wellspring. Ned nearly refused but sensed something brittle in her gaze. Not arrogance but looming doom known only to her. So the company numbered 14. Ned, Jon, Mira, Tormund, Val. 2 giants. Mag the younger and Morna's son. Carl the maid. A silent, unsullied standard-bearer called Stoneface. 3 seasoned rangers of the Watch. They rode shaggy northern mounts, and Ned carried ice wrapped in direwolf skin. The weight reminded him with every jolt that men die for names, swords, and songs. Their path skirted starlit fields of untouched snow. Through Wolfswood where shadows swarmed like silent hounds. The first night, Ned dreamt of Catelyn standing beneath Godswood, hair floating like drowned riverweed. She whispered, I lost count of the seeds I wept for you. Don't make me weep again. He woke sweating. By day 6, the wall's enormous face towered, pale blue-gray, cracked like old glass. The eastmost gate, last hearth's spire, stood unguarded, portcullis twisted. Rangers whispered that half the Night's Watch now manned Eastwatch, the rest patrolled breaches further west. They ascended via haunted stairways half collapsed, leaving horses below. Giants climbed hand over hand, gripping rock-like ice until their knuckles bled. Atop, Ned stared across infinite white plain flecked with frozen rivers. Wind howled in his new-mended ears. Beyond horizon stalked shapes like ants, a column of dead making for shivering forest. If we head due north, Mira said, pointing at maps sketched by Jojen before his vision ended. We reach the gorge Joramun once blew into the earth. Dawn Cradle lies beyond. Ned tried to imagine geography unchanged in thousands of winters, then decided trust in a green seer's map outranked his doubts. They descended outside the wall, regained mounts, bred by wildlings to survive, then pressed into ice desert. Night temperatures could crack horn. They huddled under mammoth skins, ate seal jerky, drank meltwater spiked with good wife's root to stave off frost sickness. Melisandre seemed unaffected. Steam rose where snowflakes touched her. Tormund joked that betting her would melt a man's stones clean off. Stoneface silently cleaned Spearhead, unamused. On the 8th day, they entered shivering forest. Trees petrified by time, trunks glassy blue with sap hardened to crystal. Each branch rang like chimes when wind stirred. Echoes produced eerie harmonies that set Ghost growling. That dusk, the dead found them. Not a legion, only an advance pack of whites. A dozen children, 3 wolves, 2 bears stitched with rime. They flung themselves under pale twilight. Mag the Younger smashed bears with an uprooted limb. Mira darted through trunks, dragonglass spear biting. Jon fought silently, eyes bleak. Ned realized his son grew deadlier each moon, as if destiny honed him too. When last white fell, silence returned, punctured by Tormund's laugh. The dead dance like drunk girls when you kiss them with glass. Yet Morna's son knelt, cradling stump of leg torn by bear. Blood steamed. Melisandre crouched, pressed bleeding palm to stump, chanting. Fire-licked wound closed, flesh sizzling. Giant roared in agony, but pain ceased bleeding. Morna's son bowed enormous head to her in wonder. But Ned smelled burned meat and knew giants heal slowly. Infection might yet claim him. They marched on. 3 nights later, the ground ended in a titanic chasm. The Gorge of Joramun. Legend said a horn shattered this fissure when the king beyond the wall sought to bring down the wall, but the earth tore instead. Stalagmites of ice speared upward, bottom swallowed by darkness. A single natural bridge arched across, slicked with hoarfrost, barely wide enough for 2 men abreast. Giants could not cross. Mag the Younger insisted. We throw men across. But Ned shook head. He ordered ropes. Spiked lines hammered into ice, each traveler tied to next. Giants would guard western rim until return. Reluctantly, Mag and Morna's son knelt, letting Jon press brow to theirs in farewell. Crossing felt like crawling blade of scythe. Wind gusted, threatening to fling them. Midspan, a keening arose from crack below, as if souls trapped. Melisandre halted, eyes wide. Blood-red tears traced her cheeks. She whispered that R'hllor's opposite, the great other, dwelled in caves beneath. Ned half believed he felt a cold purpose rising, studying them. He urged onward. On the far side, terrain dipped into valley where snow swirled in ancient circle, never settling center. At its heart stood a single weirwood of impossible size, trunk as broad as Manderley's round hall. Leaves bare yet bleeding red sap that hissed when it touched snow. Bran knelt beneath roots, hands pressed to bark. His eyes were entirely white. Ned staggered forward, voiceless. Tears froze on lashes. Bran, legs bundled in furs, looked thin as reed yet emanated calm, older than sun. When Ned knelt beside him, Bran blinked, pupils resurfacing pale as new ice. "Father," Bran said, voice echoing twofold. "The boy and something deeper. I dreamed you would come." Ned gathered him, feeling bones fragile but heartbeat steady. "We've come to bring you home." Bran shook head gently. "Home is here, but also everywhere." He placed hand on Ned's brow. A storm of images flooded Ned's vision. Children of the forest singing in moonlit groves. Giants carving runes. Dragons circling in skies of dawn. Armies of ice queuing beyond a frozen lake while a horn of black glass waited on an island. Ned gasped. Bran withdrew hand. "The dead will break the wall at the Lake of Sighs," Bran said. "But you can stop them with 3 fires." Melisandre stepped forward, entranced. "Tell us." Bran nodded at Dawn Cradle's weirwood. Its roots parted, revealing spiral staircase descending into crimson-veined earth. Below sings the first fire, a stone egg of obsidian heart. Its flame does not burn flesh but truth. Bring it to the wall, and let it drink the ancient spells. Tormund whistled. "We're fetching eggs from under trees now?" Bran smiled faintly, like child overhearing adult jest. "Second fire lives at Dragonmont beneath Dragonstone. Dany's dragons will wake it. Third fire sleeps in a prince who was promised." His gaze lingered on Jon. Jon's brow furrowed. "I am no prince." Bran only replied, "We are all pages in a book we cannot read until the last chapter." Stoneface spoke for first time, accent thick. "Words for seers, not soldiers. Dead close fast." He pointed back to bridge, where horns now bellowed. Deep, bone-shaking. Ghosts snarled. Shapes filled western rim, whites by hundreds. Among them strode white walkers, crystal blades humming. Giants defended bridge, but already arrows of ice peppered Morna's sun. Ned clenched fist. "We retrieve egg, or we die here. Breaking prophecy ourselves." He ordered Mira and 2 rangers to guard Bran at route entrance. Jon, Tormund, Val, Stoneface followed him downstairs. Melisandre last, chanting Katigat. The descent spiraled through living wood, into grotto laced with crimson vines. In center lay an egg-shaped boulder, pulsing faint ember light through obsidian shell. It vibrated like a heart. Jon helped Ned heave it onto a hide sling. Heat bled but did not scorch, filling chests with bittersweet warmth. They ascended as clamor above grew thunderous. Atop, Bran sat within roots, eyes blank, guiding ravens to peck walker eyes, guiding weirwood branches to whip whites into chasm. Yet giants faltered, Mag wounded, knees buckling. Ned felt time snap. "Bran," cross with Mira on my back. But Bran shook head. "I must hold them." Ned's mind reeled. He could not abandon his son again. Then Melisandre laid hand on his arm. "We carry his hope. He carries ours." Her voice trembled. The first crack in her steel hymn. Jon sighted sling cords. Val and Stoneface flanked. Tormund hefted dragonglass axes. They sprinted toward bridge, Bran's voice echoing. "When roots bleed no more, run." As they stepped onto arch, Bran screamed far behind. Roots convulsed. Valley trembled. White walkers advanced. Yet the weirwood's red sap burst into flame, roaring green then white, forming curtain of fire that howled like living beast. Whites shrieked, retreating from sacred blaze. Jon stumbled but kept forward momentum. Wind buffeted. Flakes hissed on burning sap. At mid-span, Mag lifted battered club in salute. He had killed 100 whites, his body aflame with black fire arrows, but he roared before toppling into chasm, crushing dozens. Morna's sun covered retreat, shoulder-bleeding icicles. They reached western rim as bridge cracked behind. Giant hauled Ned up final ledge, then collapsed dead, but Egg bore no scratch. Tormund spat a prayer to whichever gods listened. Ned bowed head, mourning Bran. If dead, or something beyond death. But deeper than despair, he felt certainty. Bran's sacrifice lit first fire. Their burden must not be wasted. 5 days of relentless flight followed. Dead hunted them, but weirwood's along path burst aflame whenever walkers neared. Bran's final shield. At wall they found Eastwatch, under assault. Walkers rode ice spiders along ramparts. Defenders fought with torch and glass. Ned brandished the egg. At its glow, spiders screeched and shattered. He and Jon ascended the gatehouse. In its heart, Ned placed the egg in ancient firepot once used for signal beacons. Obsidian cracked. Light, pure and violet, flared upward, threads of flame weaving into wall itself. Blue cracks spread across ice where spells had weakened, but instead of breaking, fissures filled with glowing veins, sealing like cauterized wound. Every walker within 10 leagues screamed and burst into shards. Whites collapsed, inert. Silence blanketed battlefield, until men wept for joy. Ned slumped, feeling marrow vibrate with Egg's dying hum. One fire lit, 2 to go. John helped him stand. "Bran?" he asked, voice raw. Ned closed eyes. In flicker behind lids he saw Bran perched atop the valley's burning tree, form half shadow, half raven, eyes bright as dawn. "He watches," Ned whispered. "He guides." John gripped his shoulder. "Then we'll finish his work." Ghost howled, answering horns on western rampart. Stannis' host, banners whipping, had arrived along King's Road. Behind them, Dragon's silhouette swallowed moon. Daenerys Targaryen had crossed the sea at last, answering ravens promising alliance against death. 3 fires would soon converge. Ned stared at horizon where ice and flame prepared to collide. He forgave himself for breathing, for failing, for living again. The realm was not united yet, but its pieces hurtled toward each other like sparks flung from hammer striking anvil, ready to fuse into something stronger than steel, something that could drag the dawn out of longest night. Okay. Ah. Snow fell like mute ash from a sky the color of hammered iron, cloaking the battlefield where death had frozen in its tracks. When the first fire flared inside the wall, shattered walkers lay in opalescent shards, littering the churned ice from Eastwatch's seaward bluff to the marble-white dunes that rolled northward like petrified waves. The living moved among them in wary wonder, stamping bootprints across a silence so profound it made men doubt their own existence. Every breath plumed thick and slow. Every heartbeat sounded louder than the world. Eddard Stark stood upon the gatehouse parapet and watched his people gather the fragments of what had sought to unmake them. Ghost prowled against his legs, hackles half raised, nostrils quivering as if the direwolf suspected the shards might knit again. But the wallfire Bran had woven into the glacier still pulsed violet along frost-laden merlons and arrow slits, and Ned felt the pulse inside his chest like a second heart. The egg's light did not warm him. It hummed through bone and blood alike, a music beyond hearing that told him the cracks in his old life had been filled with a new purpose. Jon Snow returned from the western tower, dragging an oak chest, filled with rescued dragonglass heads. Soot smeared across the bridge of his nose. Tormund lumbered behind, carrying 2 armfuls of broken spears, as if they weighed no more than reeds. The old wildling caught Ned's eye and flashed a grin full of chipped teeth. "Ain't often we send dead men scurrying without spilling half our guts, Lord Corpsewalker." "Good omen?" Ned managed the ghost of a smile. He wondered whether anything so bloody as war could ever be called a good omen, yet part of him believed it. Bran's sacrifice had proven the enemy was neither inexorable nor immune. Hope had teeth again. Hope. And dragons. Far beyond the frost haze drifting inland from the bay, 3 dark shapes spiraled downward, wings the span of fallen towers. Their roars crackled through the stillness, and men who had kept their courage against the cold dead felt their knees shake at the sound of living primeval fire. The beasts alighted upon the frozen strand below the wall, claws carving trenches in sea spray ice. Frost steamed off black scales and bronze, off green gold wings and cream belly, as if the very cold recoiled. Between those wings rode Daenerys Targaryen, cloak snapping scarlet behind silver blonde braids. She dismounted with fluid grace, followed by Melisandre and the blood-stained knight Ser Jorah Mormont. On another dragon's shoulder landed Prince Aegon, called Young Griff by those who suspected but did not name him. Black hair matted with salt. The last dragon bore Tyrion Lannister half-strapped into a saddle he clearly distrusted. That he did not tumble to his death seemed miracle enough to silence a sept worth of prayers. Ned descended the zigzag stairs of the gatehouse with Jon at his side. Snow and Targaryen, wolf and dragon. How many centuries had passed since such bloodlines stood together atop the wall? The Old North in him wanted to kneel beneath the weirwood's gaze and ask the gods what jest they played. But he was too full of awe to think of jokes. When the great ice gate rumbled open, Ned strode across the causeway, ice sheathed at his back. The Dragon Queen approached with head high, amethyst eyes unblinking in the stinging flurries. She halted 3 paces off, studying him as she might study a blade newly drawn from the forge. Testing heat, weight, the sheen of destiny. "To meet a man slain by my father's conqueror," restored by fire, who now stands guardian of the breach between life and death. This is a day the poets will envy, she said, voice low, threaded with something that was not quite amusement. Ned bowed at the waist. Your Grace, I am Eddard Stark of Winterfell, and I owe your dragons a debt for the warmth they bring in a deathly cold. Her eyes flickered past him to the glowing fissures. That flame was birthed not by my children, but by a magic older than Valyria. Your people speak of the three fires the world must know before the dawn. I would hear that tale from your own lips. Now. So Ned told her, of Bran beneath the dawn cradle tree, of the obsidian egg, and the violet veins now sealing the wall, of the dead that shattered like glass at the egg's eruption. He spoke sparsely, yet the story rang in the air like a sword stroke. Daenerys listened with still intensity. When he finished, she glanced at Drogon, whose furnace eyes glittered amber. Dragonstone rumbles, she said, and not with my hatchlings' hearts alone. You need the fire asleep in Dragomon's bowels for the second flame. Let us wake it together. Now. Boomed Stannis Baratheon, riding up the shore with Melisandre, Davos, and ranks of mailed knights filing behind. His face remained gaunt and uncompromising, but something had eased in his habitual scowl. Perhaps victory, perhaps acceptance of allies fate chose for him. Dragonstone belongs to me by right, yet to all the living by necessity. We sail. Before daylight failed, ravens burst from Eastwatch's rookery like black sparks. Their message flew to White Harbor, to Winterfell, to every castle whose maester still breathed. With them flew a promise: hold fast. The North, the Crown, and the Mother of Dragons march on fire and ice alike. But sail they must first. The fleet Stannis had seized from King's Landing still rode anchor in the bay beyond the burned hulks of Lannister Drommonds. Many vessels bore scorch scars. Some lacked masts and needed winter carpentry quick as miracles. Yet in 3 days the wounded fleet limped out beneath lungs of canvas patched by bakers' wives and coppersmiths. A squadron of Braavosi cogs hired by Tyrion joined, their captain hoping to trade safe passage for loan forgiveness from the Iron Bank. The voyage south pitted them against bitter headwinds and roving bergs. Dragons ranged far above, harrying ice floes to stoke the crew's faith. Below decks, Ned shared cramped quarters with Jon, Davos, and Thoros of Myr. The Red Priest come north when the wallfire lit half the night sky. Thoros sat cross-legged on a rope coil, brow sweaty as he wove spells over barrels of pitch, murmuring that fire blessing would turn them into liquid dawn. Davos eyed the barrels warily. He had lost fingers for less volatile contraband. On the 14th day, sails silhouetted Dragonstone's jagged-toothed cliffs. Black glass towers cut against bruised sunset. Plumes of sulfur drifted from vents along the smoking mountain's flank. As the ships tacked for the causeway inlet, Drogon soared overhead and let a jet of flame sweep the sky. A salute that left men cheering though the heat scorched rigging. Stannis paced the prow of the Oathkeeper, cloak snapping. Every stone on this isle knows my tread, he growled to Ned. But the mountain never sleeps quietly. If it stirs, it must be for purpose. Ashore, the Queen's Dothraki outriders galloped along the gray sand beach, bareback, half-naked, whooping at the sting of winter wind. They had never known such cold, yet their bravado hid awe that neither their Khal nor their Khaleesi placed more faith in steel than in what a pale Stark carried inside bone. The War Council convened in the chamber of the Painted Table. Ned studied the ancient relief of Westeros, pale wood ridges worn smooth by generations of plodding palms. The wall, tiny, straight, ironically neat, glowed faintly in the lamplight, as though reflecting Bran's violet veins across 200 leagues. Around the table stood Daenerys, Stannis, Jon, Tyrion, Davos, Ser Barristan, Melisandre, Thoros, Missandei, Varys newly arrived in spider-quiet secrecy, Asha Greyjoy representing the Iron Islands, Wyman Manderly by Raven Vision, which worked into a glass candle, and a hooded figure who claimed to speak for the last of the children of the forest. The figure's voice rustled like leaves in snow. Melisandre began. The stone heart beneath this mountain was molten when dragons first bound fire to flesh. It can be wakened again, but it demands blood and breath. The prince that was promised must descend with fire-born siblings. Only dragonfire, blended with royal life, can call the second flame. Only dragonfire, blended with royal life, can call the second flame. Daenerys lifted her chin. Then Drogon and I will go. Rhaegal and Viserion follow. If price must be paid, the blood of the dragon will answer. Stannis stirred. Royal life meaning Targaryen life? Or Baratheon? My veins hold half the blood of Aegon through my grandmother, and the crown of Westeros sits upon my brow. Nah. Melisandre's ruby winked. Perhaps both lines forged together. Eyes passed to Jon Snow. He stiffened. Ned felt the tremor in his son's breath. The truth of Jon's birth, Lyanna's bed of blood, Rhaegar's desperate promise, had weighed on Ned like a secret anchor for 19 years. No one else in the council knew, though various curious tilt of head suggested suspicion. But secrets die in slower ruins even than mountains. Jon said, "If the mountain needs breath, I will lend it mine. But none of us surrenders to flames without certainty it will save the realm. We must understand what this second flame does." And, Melisandre swept a hand across the painted table. The first flame sealed cracks in the wall, slowed the cold host, broke their commanders. The second will awaken dragon's fire beneath every foundation warded by Valyrian stone. The wall, Dragonstone, Storm's End, even the long-buried ruins of Summerhall. A network of light, data white. When the third flame is kindled within the promised prince, that net will tighten around the Night King like a noose. Dow. Tyrion sipped watered wine. Sounds tidy. When have prophecies ever been tidy? Still, a little fire in the floorboards might keep common folk warm. No jest, Thoros warned. If the mountain rises too fiercely, Dragonstone will shatter, and half this fleet with it. Ser Jorah cleared his throat. Then we guide the fire, not unleash it. Dragonflame aimed into fracture vents can coax a controlled flow. We saw it in the smoking steppes of the Dothraki Sea, when Drogon scorched the red pits. The ground cracked, but did not explode. Nando. Daenerys laid her hand upon Drogon's scale-graven forearm, where it thrust through the ruined windows. We do what must be done. Preparations began before dawn. Miners recruited from Driftmark and Pentosian cell sails entered tunnels carved centuries ago by Valyrian masons seeking obsidian. At narrow throats, they drilled fissures, packed them with iron tubing and pitch. Thoros blessed each tube. Melisandre painted runes and blood upon ceiling caps. Tyrion oversaw blast calculations, muttering that magisters of the Guild of Pyromancers never taught him to direct volcanoes. 3 days later, a howl of wind blew across the summit, carrying sulfur breath, as though the mountain awaited midwife's hands. That night, the stars vanished behind cloud, and no moon rose, yet the tunnels glimmered with inner pulse. Ned prayed outside the mouth of the Heart's Passage. Head bowed as Daenerys and Drogon entered. Rhaegal slithered behind, eyes shark's green. Viserion last, pale wings reflecting torchlight. Jon accompanied them unarmed, save a dagger of dragonglass. Melisandre walked at his side chanting. A wind of molten breath rolled outward, hot enough to singe Ned's face at 10 paces. Yet the queen stepped sure-footed as a queen into court, and Drogon's talons found purchase on obsidian like blackened ice. Within, caverns vaulted higher than the septimines of old Volantis. Ribs of cooled lava arching in petrified waveforms. At the deepest chamber lay the Caldera Gate, a narrow vent plugged with crust but glowing sullen red where cracks wept embers. Drogon inhaled, chest expanding like a bellows. Daenerys touched his flank. Jon took position opposite across the vent, staring into molten glass. Memories of ghost tunneling through snow flashed in his eyes. No snow down here, only rock and fire. Lightless shadows danced on sweat-sheened skin. Now, Melisandre intoned. Flame erupted from Drogon's maw, a spear of orange-white. Rhaegal joined, then Viserion. 3 jets hammered the vent core. The crust glowed brilliant, sagged, then split with a sound like mountains breaking. A bloom of magma surged upward, but not uncontrolled. Dragonfire shaped it, coaxed it, whirled it into a pillar that rose then bent, jagged as a sword of liquid moonlight, channeling down lava tubes carved by miners. The pitch charges ignited in sequence, the iron tubes screaming with superheated breath, and the fire dove, streaking through bedrock veins that radiated outward beneath sea and stone. Lightning flashed through the chamber. Violet at first, then gold, then a color no eye had name for, leaping from arch to arch, until every wall burned with hidden glyphs left by Valyrian sorcerers. Jon staggered, fell to a knee. Daenerys reached for him, but the air turned to glass. Her hand sparked and recoiled. Melisandre hurled herself forward, ruby blazing. She pressed both palms to Jon's breast. The air around them cracked, a shell splitting. Ned felt it from the tunnel mouth and began to run, heart racing, hammering the mountain's own rhythm. Tyrion and Ser Jorah shouted warnings behind. In that instant, Jon's eyes flared snow blue, like walker eyes inverted through the prism of light. A swirl of steam spiraled from his mouth. Daenerys saw the same color deep inside the vent's core. Fire twisted toward Jon, threading into him, passing through him into the vent on the far side, the current of power completing a circuit. Melisandre's voice cut through roaring stone. The second flame is guided. The prince's body is the gate. Her words cracked as the mountain convulsed. Jon gasped and collapsed. Drogon ceased fire, blinking. Rhaegal and Viserion echoed him. The magma column sank, leaving behind a glowing lattice etched across the vent walls, pulsing red, then violet, then steady dragon's gold. Silence fell except the hiss of cooling rock. Ned reached Jon's side. Jon breathed but shallow, skin cold despite furnace heat. Daenerys knelt, fingertips brushing his neck. "He lives," she whispered, almost unbelieving. Melisandre sagged against a basalt spur, blood seeping from her nose. "One more flame," she croaked. Then dawn. When they emerged by dawn, castle guards swore the mountain's entire flank glowed like an ember beneath fresh crust. Yet no eruption spat afar. Columns of steam rose from fumaroles. Seabirds wheeled above like pieces of torn parchment in a furnace gust. That day ravens sprinted south and north alike. The second flame is lit, but with word flew tidings of fresh calamity. The Night King, stung by wallfire and losing hold on his walker lieutenants, had mustered his host on the frozen lake called the Sigh, a yawning plate of ice half encircling the old Nightfort ruins. There he fed new life to giants he'd raised from seabed graves, creatures whose limbs were coral white and eyes abyssal. Worse, he had fashioned a breach at the wall's opposite end near Shadow Tower, where violet veins had not yet grown. Through that breach poured a river of living ice. Stannis clenched jaw. "We march at once. Every able rider and dragon." "Menderel." Daenerys laid a hand upon Drogon's talons. "The dragons tire. The forging drained them. We need days." "Dead things do not grant days," Stannis snapped. "And neither will our own people if they see us hesitate," Davos murmured. "A hammer must cool, else it shatters." But Ned straightened. "We ride." He sensed a compass inside him, pointing north. Not to Winterfell this time, nor the wall, but to the Lake of Sighs. He could almost hear Bran's voice. "The noose tightens." Jon awoke an hour later. Melisandre hovered, feeding him water laced with Pyrrhicus root. When Ned entered Jon's cabin, his son pushed himself upright, cheeks sunken, but resolve burning. "Tell me we leave soon," he croaked. Ned knelt. "As soon as Drogon's wing beats steady and your legs hold." "My legs hold now." Jon swung them over Bunka Dog. They trembled, but stayed. He shot Ned an apologetic glance for the lie. Ned smiled grimly. Honesty was a luxury in war. Word spread. Preparations became fevered. The Unsullied embarked on the swiftest galleys, bound for Eastwatch to reinforce the wall's breach. Dothraki mounted freshly ferried northern shagbacks, smaller than their beloved horses, but hardy across ice. Asha's Ironborn escorted supply hulks to Torrhen's Square. From Winterfell, Robb rode with 25,000 spears, Greatjon at one flank, Wyman Manderly's greenstone armor at the other. Lady Lyanne Ormont commanded the Bear Guard, adolescent and inexorable. The realm, Ned thought, moved like a giant animating after generations of restless sleep. In 4 days they gathered at the Sigh, a wide valley of wind-polished ice ringed by pallid rocks. The Night King's host stood upon the lake in lattice formations. White cavaliers upon undead horses, skeletal mammoths hitched to siege turrets, frost serpents coiled like living storm clouds. At their center loomed the Night King himself astride a creature resembling a wyvern carved from black diamond, eyes glacial. He bore a spear of red-ravaged ice, jagged, pulsing faint rose hue stolen from killed weirwoods. Behind him rose spires of blue crystal, soul spears, Thoros called them. Focuses for necromancy. Destroy 1 in 1,000 dead might fall, but approach and you bled life from your marrow. Ned consulted with Daenerys, Stannis, Robb, and Jon in the pre-dawn stillness, beside a ridge of permafrost. Dragons crouched behind, emitting low rumbles, smelling the unnatural. Firelight flickered off shining armor plates hammered in Winterfell forgers, steel layered with dragonglass shards fused to edges, a technique Tyrion had refined with Maester Wolkan. Our strength lies in 3 arms, Ned said, voice low. Dragons to strike soul spears, northern hosts to bait dead cavalry into kill pockets lined with wildfire pits, and the prince, Jon, to close the new breach if we drive walkers back. Aye. Jon grimaced. How? The second flame used the mountain's heart. The lake is only ice, Melisandre answered. You are the vessel now. Where you stand, fire made night through your blood. Slay the Night King near the breach, and the third flame will blossom of its own accord. But we don't know that, Tyrion muttered. We know only that prophecies enjoy our discomfort. Daenerys laid a hand on Jon's forearm, inevitable as dawn. They shared a glance of mutual burdens, a strange comfort between 2 people bred for crowns neither had asked for. Ned's gut twisted at the intimacy, still he could not fault it. Love had carved worse tragedies, and sometimes carved salvation. They shook hands around, plans etched in minds more than paper. Winter wind would have shredded parchment. At sunrise horns blew, Stannis' deep stag trumpet, and the wild thrum of Dothraki war pipes. The living advanced onto the coastal ice shelf. Dragons rose first, wings glittering gold in dawn's high slant. Tito the unsullied standard-bearer marched after them waving the red and black banner. Behind came columns of Northmen singing the Barrow Lord's dirge, their boots crunching frost. Wildlings howled war cries to Mother Mammoth and the Horned Lord. Giants hammered great drums carried between them. The Night King answered with silence at first. Then one echoing note, half shriek, half horn, sang across the valley. The white army surged. Cavalry formed spearheads, skittering across ice without regard for cracking. Mammals thundered. Frost serpents hissed sheets of biting shards. Dragons dived. Drogon engulfed a soul spear in swirling napalm. Crystal burst skyward in blue shrapnel, and 1,000 whites collapsed mid-charge, limbs jerking like cut marionettes. But 2 other soul spears held, and Walker archers loosed javelins of frozen mist. One speared Viserion's wing. The dragon snarled, pinwheeling but righted itself. On the ground, wildfire pits erupted, as dead ranks galloped over hidden trenches. Green conflagrations opened like hungry maws, swallowing riders and scattering the adjacent lines. Yet the dead reformed with geometric precision impossible for living armies. They drove down on Robb's center, gray wind slashing at their flanks. Ice shattered under stamping hooves, but cracks refroze as swiftly, magically mended. Tormund, commanding the left, led free folk berserkers in wedge formation, aimed at the second soul spear. They fought through white bears twice the size of any living kin, though each swipe flung bone chips that cut flesh like glass. At 50 paces, a walker giant smashed into them, skull crowned with stag antlers of hoarfrost. Tormund sprang, dragonglass axe, glancing off exoskeletal hide. Mira Reed hurled a spear into the giant's eye. It reeled, arms flailing cleavers carved from ship keels, yet fresh whites swarmed, burying Mira beneath clawing limbs. Ned saw none of this directly. He rode with Jon, Davos, Sir Barristan, and a picked guard of North and Stormland's elite toward the breach at the western lip of the valley. Their path skirted along rock outcrop dubbed the Wolf's Claw. The breach yawned ahead as a corridor of gloom between two fractured walls of ice, where violet veins had not yet grown. Through it poured a steady stream of fresh dead. Shepherded by a trio of white walkers clad in black ice mail. "Hold them," Ned barked, voice hoarse. Barristan spurred forward with Stormlanders to engage the walkers' escort, blades ringing like bells of riven crystal. Davos formed shield wall to plug gap. Dusk-white wights hammered shields relentlessly, but dragonglass-studded maces felled them in heaps. Jon dismounted. He stood at breach lip, breathing clouds that glittered faintly gold. The mountain fire alive in him still. Melisandre appeared from swirling frost, as if the wind birthed her. She seized his chin. "Slay their king and claim the fire." He nodded but glanced at Ned. "We finished together." Ned unsheathed ice. The great blade shivered. Runes glowing dull crimson from the obsidian fused along its fuller. He had once swung this weapon to behead deserters under a tranquil morning sky. Now he would swing it beneath winter apocalypse to behead the Lord of Death. Daenerys struck then. Drogon plunged through hail of ice javelins and raked red fire across the battlefield's heart. The second soul spear cracked, raining shards into the lake. Huge pockets of whites collapsed. Tyrion on Rhaegal used cunning passes to lure walker archers into friendly fire, turning their frostbolts against their own lines. Viserion limped, but still spat ghost-white flame that carved trenches. Seeing his empire unravel, the Night King streaked skyward on his obsidian wyvern. He flew toward Drogon, javelin of bloody ice cocked. Daenerys braced, Drogon banking. At that precise moment Rhaegal tore across his flank. The Night King flung javelin at the green dragon, but misjudged angle. The bolt pierced Rhaegal's shoulder, but before it could explode in killing frost, Jon's hidden fire answered. A beam of violet gold erupted from within Jon. No flame, but a torrent of radiant energy, arcing like a reversed thunderbolt from breach to sky. It struck the javelin mid-air. The ice shard dissolved, showering fine blue powder that sparkled harmlessly. The Night King wheeled. His wyvern screamed, a sound that chilled marrow. He spotted the source and descended. Ned shouted for Davos to hold line. He sprinted onto Ice Shelf with Jon, toward a rocky spire that jutted like an altar. Snow devils spiraled around them. The King of Winter landed with deafening crack, feet crunching shallow holes. His spear extended, tip dripping cold fire. No ordinary duel. This was history's hinge. He moved first, a blur of silent speed. Ned parried the spear's thrust with ice. Frost skittered up the blade, seeking purchase. Jon lunged on Walkerblade Longclaw, its edge blazing unseen heat. The Night King flipped aside with impossible grace, cool as drifting snow. His wyvern hissed, wings buffeting. Sparks flew. Violet, icy blue, each impact ringing through valley. Ned feinted high. Jon sliced low. Spear whirled like comet. It drove Jon to a knee, glanced off his pauldron. Ned caught shaft. Frost, searing skin. He tugged, but the spear froze to his gauntlet. Laugh. A soundless exhale. Escaped the Night King's blue lips. He tore the weapon free, ripping gauntlet finger as crimson flecks crystallized mid-air. Jon rose behind him, ignoring pain. With both hands he plunged Longclaw straight through the armor plating of the wyvern's neck. White flames gouted. The beast writhed, knocking Ned aside. The Night King turned just as Ned regained stance. Ice swung lateral. Spear angled to deflect. Steel kissed frost at the hush before a scream. Jon yanked the blade free and leapt high. Guided perhaps by wind or destiny, he drove Longclaw down on the Night King's shoulder. But the true killing came when Ned reversed ice in an uppercut, severing the spear hand at wrist. The weapon clattered. The wyvern shrieked. In the same heartbeat Jon's sword cleaved deeper. The Night King's torso cracked. Light, violet, gold, blue, all colors at once, burst through seams of ice, engulfing figure and mount. They shattered into blizzard of crystalline ash. A roar rippled outward, tangible as shockwave. Every wight on the lake faltered, limbs jerking, before falling inert. The final soul spear crumbled, freeing a thunder of disintegrating frost giants. The undead mammoths toppled like icebergs cracking, scattering powdered sleet. Across the valley, men and women of Westeros and beyond raised weapons, screams of triumph, torn raw by wind that suddenly felt less cruel. The sky brightened, clouds thinning to reveal a shard of sun pale as milk but radiant as hope. For the first time that winter, warmth touched faces without courtesy of dragonfire. At the breach, violet light seeded itself into the ragged ice. Branching fissures fused, knitting shut with luminous tendons. The breach sealed, veins spread along the wall toward the shadow tower, weaving net where cracks had gnawed. The third flame had blossomed, born of the prince, midwifed by two fathers of different name, bright enough to write new constellations upon mortal hearts. Jon collapsed. Ned caught him. Blood seeped from the graze where spear kissed shoulder, but wound already crusted amber, heat pulsing beneath. Melisandre knelt opposite, tears carving black streaks through ash on her cheeks. "It is done," she whispered. "The dawn is kindled." "What of my son Bran?" Ned asked gently, voice hoarse. The question had haunted every breath. Melisandre closed her eyes. "I see ravens riding the first light over a forest where dawn never died. His spirit walks there. He is keeper of the gate now, neither dead nor bound." Ned's shoulders sagged, grief and gratitude mingling. He clasped Jon's hand. "Your brother saved us all." Jon swallowed. "We save each other always." The field of sighs transformed to a plain of glittering frost corpses, still as statues. Survivors moved among them, cutting away teeth of dragonglass, salvaging anything useful. A grim harvest, but necessary. Giants mourned their fallen by beating drums so low the ice vibrated. Dothraki rode circles, flinging torches, until dead shapes melted into glassy puddles that would refreeze into harmless sheets. Stannis strode up, helm under arm, face smeared with walker dust. He regarded Ned and Jon with something akin to wonder. "We have won the battle men will tell for 10,000 years. Now dawn comes, yet rule of kingdoms endures. There are debts." Daenerys joined, cloak charred along hem. "There will be more work in mending than in conquest, but I would mend beside these men." She looked at Jon, then at Ned, and the old wolf saw question in her eyes, not of crowns, but of bonds. Tyrion limped after, rubbing bruised thigh. "We should pray to any deity that this victory doesn't birth new wars for the spoils, but if it must, let us argue inside warm halls, not on frozen lakes." Ned rose, pulling Jon gently. "My lords, my queen, we will return to Winterfell. Let the realm heal there first. We have enough bones to bury." They walked back across ice that now cracked softly beneath warming sun. On a ridge, Ned paused and turned one last time to where the Night King had fallen. Only a depression of glittering frost remained, like the imprint of a vanished constellation. He took a breath, tasting pine sap and distant salt. No longer the copper tang of fear. He thought of those lost, Bran, Lyanna, Rickard Karstark, Mira Reed, whose fate still uncertain, thousands of nameless smallfolk. He thought of those alive, Catelyn waiting at Winterfell, Sansa rebuilding court among broken stones, Arya somewhere on distant roads finding her own path. He thought of dawns yet to rise for children born beneath peaceful roofs. And for the first time since the axe beneath the sept of Baelor, Eddard Stark felt entirely, profoundly alive. Not borrowed life, not resurrected duty, simply alive. Heart beating in rhythm with a world renewed. The wall still stood, but now it shimmered with veins of living light. A monument not just to fear but to hope. Dragons wheeled overhead, framing the pale sun with wings, the color of old myths. Somewhere beyond hearing, a smith would soon hammer melted blades into plowshares. A maester would pen records. A singer would test chords to fit this impossible tale. And a quiet voice in Ned's memory whispered that winter had indeed come, had tried its hardest, and the realm, united at last, had endured. Wind rustled his cloak. He set his face southwest, toward home where God's wood branches would soon bud anew. John fell into step beside him, Daenerys on his other side, their strides matching unconsciously. Behind them the army of the living followed, and the sun climbed, slow but relentless, over a horizon no longer bound in ice. Oh, K. Wanda. Morning mist wreathed the King's Road as a slow, rolling sigh, drifting between the frost-gray trunks and curling around the hooves of an army that was no longer an army so much as an unwieldy procession of pilgrims. They marched not to win a battle, there were none left to win, but to knit together a realm whose seams had ripped like old sailcloth in a storm. Riders in battered mail shared trail rations with Dothraki horse lords, wrapped in borrowed bear hides. Unsullied slung crossbeams for makeshift bridges, while iron-born carpenters barked orders in harsh seaward accents. Every half-mile another farmstead emerged from the trees, its doors flung wide in wonder as living legends tramped past the threshold of ordinary lives. Eddard Stark had taken to riding at the head of this living river with the same grave patience he once reserved for presiding over Winterfell's harvest courts. He neither waved like a monarch nor brooded like a general. He merely observed, committing each joint cart and every child perched atop a mule to memory, as though the tally itself were a prayer against forgetting how dearly this victory had been bought. Ice lay across his saddlebow wrapped in wool, but he never touched the hilt, except when small folk begged to see the famous sword. Even then he unsheathed only an inch of rippled Valyrian steel, enough to flash silver in the pale sunlight before settling it again with a soft click. Weapons, after all, had done enough talking. Jon rode at his side on a rangy dun courser Robb had sent down from Winterfell. Long-legged, sure-footed, temperament steady but not dull. Ghost loped alongside, often disappearing into the trees to flush out a startled hare or investigate scents no man could name. The direwolf seemed larger than ever, muscles packed beneath winter coat, red eyes burning with eerie wisdom. Jon's own eyes still filmed silver at the edges whenever the violet veins in the wall's distant ice were mentioned. Yet the fissure of power Bran had opened in him no longer bled raw pain. It felt instead like an ember tucked near his heart, warm but banked, waiting for breath. The dragons scouted overhead at intervals, each pass heralded by a shudder in the air, and the chorus of camp followers shouting thanks to gods they'd never bothered with before. Daenerys preferred flying at dawn and dusk, when the world blushed lilac, but she'd taken to landing each afternoon to ride among the columns, learning names, listening to grievances. She seemed to Ned a flame that refused to consume, brilliant, dangerous, yet nurturing the first green shoots of a realm thawing from nightmare. With her rode Melisandre, Ser Jorah, and Tyrion, who kept a ledger of supplies so meticulous the northern quartermasters had begun consulting him on the placement of every barley sack. Stannis Baratheon traveled several leagues ahead with a spearhead of Stormlanders and reached levies, led by Sir Garland Tyrell, under the banner of a reconciled Highgarden. Their purpose was to reach King's Landing first and enforce a provisional council, so that when Ned's vast train arrived, bread carts and healers were waiting, not spiked heads and purpling rumors. Stannis had left a single ward in place before his departure. Jaime Lannister, sworn over his sister's trial to command the city watch and keep its gold cloaks sheathed. Rumor claimed the king's lair carried keys in one hand and a length of prayer beads in the other, swinging between penitent devotion and old arrogance, like a rope bridge in the wind. Sansa rode midway through the host beside Lady Lyanna Mormont, the latter barking orders at grown men twice her size with curt authority. Sansa absorbed lessons silently, watching how Lyanna delegated, how she praised sparingly yet sincerely, how she corrected missteps without shaming the offender. The girl who once dreamed of courtly balls had become a woman studying the architecture of power. When evening fires were lit, she visited the wounded, coaxing smiles, reciting anew the tale of the Lake of Sighs to children who demanded it nightly. She always began the same way. There was once a kingdom inside a mirror of ice so cold, even memories froze solid. Ned sometimes lingered at the edges of those circles, heart aching at the clear bell of her storyteller's voice. Robb met them at the last river with a vanguard of Winterfell spearmen, and a cart piled with salted beef and ale. Father and son clasped arms hard enough to whiten knuckles. No words were needed. Gray wind bounded around Ghost in circles, until both wolves snarled and nipped like pups reunited after a long winter burrow. 2 days later, the procession topped a low ridge, and the broken towers of Winterfell erupted into view, antlers of stone crowned in fresh-laid timber scaffolds. New slate roofs glimmered. Smoke drifted from 20 chimneys where only 5 had puffed 6 moons before. The ruins Ramsay Bolton had savored were mostly gone, swallowed by bustling workshops, forges clanging, masons' sing-song chants. The sight punched Ned's ribs so fiercely he had to grip his saddle. Winterfell was alive, and more. It was becoming. The gates boomed open. Catelyn waited under the stone arch, hair shot through with silver but eyes bright as summer rivers. She smiled, not a brittle smile edged by grief, but a survivor's smile, deep-rooted and generous. Ned dismounted stiff-legged and folded her into his arms, while the courtyard erupted in cheers. There they lingered, head bowed together, drinking the moment like spring water. Inside the hall, they found chaos of the better sort. Cooks shouting for turnips, ravens flapping overhead, bearing sealed scrolls from the eerie, old town, Sunspear. Maester Walken bustled about in fresh-dyed gray robes, a ring of new Valyrian steel on his chain, a gift from Tyrion for advancements in dragonglass fletching. Lady Barbary Dustin stood at a trestle table, allocating lumber quotas to Karstark and Hornwood foremen. Behind her loomed 2 towering shadows, Sandor Clegane and Brian of Tarth, unlikely duo tasked with training a mixed retinue of northern cavalry and unsullied light lancers. Children darted through legs chasing carved wooden ravens as toys. At supper, Ned rose, meaning to offer simple thanks, but the hall demanded more. So he spoke of Bran in words he hoped would reach any flicker of his son's spirit, still riding the ravens overhead. He spoke of sacrifice, of duty, tempered by mercy, of the realm's second chance. Then he unrolled a broad scrap of parchment, sealed with both the direwolf and the crowned stag. It was Stannis' decree, countersigned by Daenerys Targaryen. A great moot would convene at Harrenhal by midsummer to draft a charter of the 7 kingdoms. A reckoning of laws, rights, and obligations none could redefine by whim of dragonfire or crossbow string again. Every High Lord, every Free City envoy, every guild speaker and faith leader was summoned. And Eddard Stark, as Lord Protector of the Northern Marches, would preside alongside Queen Regent Daenerys Stormborn and King Stannis, until a lasting settlement took shape. The proclamation set the hall abuzz. Lord Wyman Manderley toasted so vigorously his beard dripped ale. Lady Maeg Mormont shouted that Bear Island would field 3 ships to pick up lords delayed by damaged roads. Even Barbary Dustin nodded, eyes narrowed but respectful. Afterward, when torches guttered low and music faded, Ned slipped outside to the godswood. Moonlight silvered the heart tree, its carved face streaked red with sap. Snow dusted the old stone bench where Bran used to sit. Ned knelt and placed a hand upon a gnarled root, closing his eyes. He tried to pray but found no words fit. Instead he listened, to wind rushing high overhead, to distant smith hammers, to the slow creak of branches healing beneath new buds. Behind the tapestry of living sounds he imagined he heard ravens whispering in a voice that might have been Bran's, though it spoke no language men remembered. Soft footsteps rustled leaves. Jon approached, cloak drawn close, eyes still rimmed faint silver. "I can hear it too," he murmured. Ned looked up. "What does it say?" "Nothing I can shape into words. Only that we mustn't fail what he bought, none of us." Ned rose. They walked the perimeter path where moon pools traced light across patches of thawed grass. "When spring fully comes," Ned said, "I will bury his body here if the gods allow it. Spirit or memory or whatever remains of him can roost in the branches, but a son should have a stone." Jon nodded. "And what of the charter? 7 kingdoms have 6,000 quarrels. They want settle by midsummer." "Then a while." "Perhaps not," Ned conceded. Yet beginning is half of justice. Harrenhal's ruins are vast enough to house all their arguments, and its stones remember fire, so men may think twice before conjuring more. John exhaled. Daenerys will do right by the realm, I think. But people will fear a dragon queen. They fear dragons, Ned corrected. Queens they learn, if the queen listens. John hesitated. She listens to me. That bond is plain. Ned stopped beside the pool. Many may question it. Rhaegar's blood flows in you, no matter what name you carried. If you take the knee to Stannis for peace, some will still whisper, dragon. If you wed Daenerys, others will call it ambition. And if I do neither, they will craft worse tales. Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Do what is right, not what is easiest. That was my failing once, believing the two were the same. Joan's voice dropped. You kept my birth from me because you thought it right. I thought it kind, Ned admitted. Kindness untethered to truth can twist into cruelty. I see that now. John studied the weeping face on the white trunk. Truth, then, he said finally. Let the charter carve it into stone so no child wears another's name out of fear. A raven flapped down, landing on a branch just above. It cocked its head, black eyes shining. Ned half expected it to speak. Instead, it clicked its beak thrice, then flew into night. Ka. Spring thaw quickened. Snowmelt gurgled down the King's Road, turning cart ruts into rivers of mud. Yet wagons rolled southward all the same. Mirish textile merchants, brave OC bankers, citadel archivists, escorting mule trains laden with scrolls, lords in bright trains of heraldry unseen since Eris's tourneys. The charter moot at Harrenhal drew them like metal filings to a magnet. The ruin itself had changed. Stannis dispatched builders to patch the Widow's Tower. Daenerys sent unsullied detachments to clear rubble. And the green men of the Trident cut reed causeways so foot traffic need not slog thigh-deep through marsh. Over this reborn labyrinth hung new banners. The crowned stag in Arelor red, the three-headed dragon ablaze against black, the direwolf of Winterfell, interspersed with standards from every corner of Westeros. In the great courtyard they erected a timber coliseum shaped like the realm itself. A huge, concentric arrangement of benches sloped inward toward a low circular dais. There, the High Septon, in immaculate crystal robes, opened proceedings on the first day of the full summer moon. The sun beat down, a pleasant warmth none had felt for years. Yet inside tempers simmered. Cersei Lannister. Stripped of crown and escorted by a silent Jaime, sat hooded in an iron cage atop the dais, awaiting trial in sight of all. Her son Joffrey occupied the neighboring cage, sullen, occasionally spitting curses until Ser Barristan's glare hushed him. Euron Greyjoy was absent, lost at sea or plotting new storms. But Asha Greyjoy sat among the lords to plead for the Iron Islands' admission to peaceful trade pacts in exchange for ending reaving. From Dorne came Prince Quentyn Martell leading a contingent of spear maidens. The Vale sent Ser Lyn Corbray. The Reach bore twins of diplomatic fervor and suspicion in Garland Tyrell and his brother Willis, both eager to safeguard harvest routes. Ned's role as neutral moderator taxed him more than any sword swing. He rose each morning before dawn, reading petitions until his eyes blurred, then sat for 9 hours amid shouting matches that oscillated from insult to poetry to near duels. Tyrion, quill in hand, drafted compromise clauses at speed rivaling bards. Melisandre translated Valyrian maritime law for Dornish envoys. Davos calmed tempers with plain sailors' tales reminding highborn ears how empty bellies start wars. On day 13, Jon requested the floor. He spoke simply, neither prince nor commander but the man who bled fire on the lake. He asked that the watch be reconstituted, not as penal servitude, but as a voluntary shield, its members drawn from every realm and honored with stipends funded equally by all. No child should be forced to steal bread or break vows to avoid lifetime exile at a frozen post. He offered his own keep at Long Lake as training ground, and pledged half the spoils of wildling trade routes through Eastwatch to finance it. Debate raged. Stannis bristled at cost. Tyrell sniffed at shrub lords commanding taxes. Yet by dusk, the motion passed in full. Jon breathed easier. The first brick laid for a wall that could outlast heroes. 2 days later, Daenerys rose, wearing no crown, only a midnight dress lit for riding. She proposed abolition of feudal ward hostage customs. No more sons sent as chips to be played against rebellious fathers. Instead, she unveiled scholarships for cadet heirs at the Citadel and the Red Keep, binding houses through shared education rather than glittering cages. Half the lords balked, half applauded. It was the maester from Sour Carhold who tipped the scales, explaining how his lord's youngest boy returned from Old Town speaking 3 tongues and negotiating better grain terms with Bravos than any master of coin. The vote carried by narrow margin. That night Ned stood on Harrenhal's parapet, watching dry lightning flicker in the east, where storms brooded over the narrow sea. Catelyn joined him, cloak fluttering. She'd spent the day coaxing the noblewomen to endorse a charter clause on widow protections. A small victory but vital. Her skin glowed in the lantern light. Lines of grief etched softer, not erased. They talked of little things. Arya's latest raven from Bravos describing sword lessons. Sansa's scheme to convert the Great Hall of Winterfell into dual-purpose banquet and council chamber. Robb's tentative courtship of a Piper cousin who managed the keep's falcon muse with fearless grace. Hope, Ned thought, was not a sudden sunrise but a gradual paling of night. He informed her then that Davos had quietly secured 3 casks of Summerhall parchments, rescued from Wildfire's edge decades earlier. Records Rhaegar had studied about the prince that was promised. When the charter concluded, Ned meant to ride south, examine them, and bring what truths he could to Bran's memory. Catelyn only squeezed his hand. "We have lost so much," she said. "If discovering how Rhaegar misread prophecy prevents the next bright fool from doing worse, ride as far as you must." Another moon passed. By then, even tempers had cooled into cautious collegiality. The Charter of Harrenhal, 37 articles hammered by reason and raw fatigue, was signed beneath the eyes of every faith and the watchful gaze of dragons perched upon the widow's tower. It bound the realm to rule of law over rule of whim, enshrined protection for small folk grievance councils called Snow Courts, mandated rotating hosts to garrison the wall. So no frontier felt abandoned. It recognized the autonomy of the free folk north of the wall, under Mance Rayder's kingship. So long as raids ceased and trade caravans remained safe, and it named Jon Snow High Marshal of the Watch, reporting jointly to the Crown in King's Landing and the Lord Protector in Winterfell. A singular bridge between north and south. The charter's final page bore a flourish none had predicted. Signatures of 3 children of the forest, their names etched in swirling runic shapes that gleamed when candlelight struck. Only Ned understood the weight. Bran's voice, printed by proxy. He bowed his head over the parchment. A silent vow. Late summer ripened as delegations dispersed toward coasts heavy with new grain. Daenerys prepared to fly to King's Landing and oversee the razing of the old Red Keep's dungeons, planning to build green terraces there instead. Stannis accompanied, vowing to host a harvest tribunal granting amnesty to lesser lords who surrendered unlawfully gained lands during the war. Tyrion rode with them, muttering that if peace lasted long enough to brew proper Dornish red, history might forgive the realm's talent for carnage. Ned lingered in Harrenhal's library wing one last night, sifting scrolls when a lone raven tapped the windowsill. Its eyes, gleaming gray rather than black, fixed on him. A ribbon bound its leg, a strip of weirwood bark etched with a single sigil, spiral lines within a circle. He knew it from Bran's dreams. He untied the bark. On the underside, letters burned faint red. "The roots are healed, Father. Let the branches grow." Nothing else. But it was enough to send Ned to his knees, tears hot on his cheeks. He journeyed south next day beneath escort of 6 winter-hardened guards, among them Mira Reed, her shoulder bound from wounds at the sigh. She insisted on joining. She had more debt to pay, she said, and secrets to share once they reached Summerhall. They rode at steady pace through forests singing with insects, through hamlets where children waved stalks of barley as banners, across rivers warm enough to bathe in. At each village Ned felt the braid of lives tightening into something approaching a tapestry again. Summerhall lay half crumbled, its curtain walls collapsed outward in a long-ago blaze, yet within sprouted terraces of golden poppies, purple vetch, and wild strawberries, sweet as memory. Beneath the saplings of a young grove, they found the stone vault Davis scouts had uncovered. Scrolls waited inside, some charred but legible, containing meticulous accounts of Aegon the Unlikely's dreams, the wildfire tragedy, and Rhaegar's later annotations. Mira helped Ned spread them over a camp table. By lantern they read late into night. Prophecy misheard, comet god signs mistranslated, dragon dreams tangled with mortal desire. Ned saw in those texts a warning Bran must have understood. How the hunger for destiny could blind men to simpler truths. He took Quill, began copying passages he would send to the Citadel, and to King's Landing both, ensuring no scholar could warp them in secret again. He wrote until dawn painted the horizon peach, and as first birds twittered through cracks in burnt rafters, he set Quill down and felt a distance inside his chest ease, as though a weight had shifted from heart to page. Jon arrived by Raven that evening. Ghost had sired a litter of pups in Winterfell's kennels. Sansa proposed gifting one to each realm as symbol of shared protection. Daenerys reported demolition begun at the Red Keep, with plans to inscribe charter articles into the courtyard stones, so every courtier walked over law each morning. Tormund, meanwhile, had organized a trading jamboree at Hardhome, inviting Braavosi merchants who'd never dared sail that far north. Ned chuckled over the letters, then packed the copied scrolls and set course home. Home. How strange the word felt after all these years of wandering grief. Yet when at last Winterfell's walls rose on the horizon, bats wheeling over towers gilded by autumn sunset, he knew the meaning had never changed. Home was not stone but the weaving of lives, the steadfast truth that outlasted ice and fire both. Inside the Great Hall they greeted him with the raucous chaos he'd once taken for granted. Bran's old friends training willowy saplings for new weirwoods in the courtyard. Arya's letter pinned on the notice board boasting of passage, booked on a galley to White Harbor. Robb presenting a falcon meats pie baked by his piper intended. Catelyn teasing him for smelling more of archive dust than snow. That night, after fires dulled to coals, Ned wandered to the battlements. Stars spangled the sky, clearer than he'd seen since boyhood. In the north, the wall shimmered faint violet still, yet gentler now, like distant aurora rather than wound scar. Somewhere, he trusted, Bran watched from the doorway between worlds. He whispered, thanks to old gods and new alike. Then he closed his eyes, heard again the hush of roots beneath earth and wings above branches, felt the breath of a realm breathing in unison, imperfect, fragile, but alive. Perhaps one day distant generations would forget this winter entirely. Perhaps legends would embalm it in gilded lies. But he had lived it, loved through it, and could let the stones of Winterfell tell the rest. A cool breeze rose, carrying the scent of turning leaves. Ned set his palm to the cold parapet stone and smiled into the dark, a quiet oath on his lips. Never again would silence be mistaken for peace, nor fear for duty. These scars would remind him, and he would remind the world, with words or with steel, as long as dawn kept coming. A.K. Wow. The frost had not yet left the fields when news reached Winterfell that the Greyjoy fleet had slipped anchor from Great Wick under banners, dyed a startling midnight blue. Asha's envoys wrote of uneasy whispers. Euron had not drowned beneath the boiling froth of the Savasses presumed, nor had he sailed east to vanish among the Basilisk Isles. He had lingered instead in secret docks, coaxing renegade captains with tales of glass candles that could bend wind and tide, and he had built something monstrous behind shuttered doors, prows armored in black iron, figureheads shaped like open maws, catapults rigged to hurl dragonglass stolen from unsuspecting traders out of Hardhome. When Ned read the Raven, a hush fell across the solar. Only the hearth ticked, hitting sap. Catelyn lifted her eyes from the loom where she wove a new Stark standard to hang above the Great Hall, a banner meant to show the dire wolf beneath enduring stars rather than around a sword. She saw in Ned's face the return of a colder season and set her shuttle down without a word. John arrived first, hair unbound after sparring in the yard with Brienne and Sander. Robb followed, fresh from an inspection of Wintertown's new granaries. Tyrion, visiting on brief respite from Red Keep demolition, limped in on a cane carved to resemble a snarling lion and raised an eyebrow at the tension. Ned read the dispatch aloud. The word, Iron Fleet, cracked like ice beneath weight. Robb paced. If Euron seeks mischief, he'll strike where our walls are thin. Eastwatch is still patching stone. White Harbor's docks are stretched feeding half the north. Tyrion tapped his cane. And King's Landing lies under scaffolding, its harbor clogged with rubble barges. A swarm of black iron hulls could cripple trade and choke the newborn court before the charter draws its second breath. John asked, "What of Old Town's beacon? If he sails the Sunset Sea, the Hightowers will warn us." Nemder and Shile. Ned shook his head. Euron doesn't need Old Town's riches. He seeks chaos. One spectacular blow to shatter trust. Harrenhal taught the lords to speak together. The Iron Kraken will try to remind them how easily fire and fear break alliances. Catelyn stepped beside the table. Then we must stand before the break. Baratheon, Targaryen, and Stark won north against night. Let them witness the same hand stay south against storm. It was agreed. Ravens flew to Dragonstone, Storm's End, Highgarden, Dorne, and the Iron Islands' own seat at Pike, where Queen Regent Asha now ruled in all but title. They bore a single line beneath the seals. Let no tide divide the light we forged. Daenerys answered first. She offered Drogon and Rhaegal to scour the seas, but Tyrion, scribbling calculations on vellum, advised against chasing phantoms across surf. Dragons in the sky may scatter the flock, he argued, yet krakens swim deep. Better to lure them to nets we cast. Stannis, for once, concurred. A plan took shape within hours. Bait Euron with royal treasure rumored to sail from White Harbor to the capital. Grain, gold, and the charter's original vellum. A decoy convoy would depart under heavy fanfare. Hidden among its real grain hulks would ride 3 fireships loaded with Stormlander pitch, 6 Authority Scorpions loaded with dragonglass bolts, and in the flagship's hold, the one prize Euron could never resist, a fragment of weirwood inscribed in children runes the bark message Bran had sent to Ned. The rumor would say it revealed a forgotten sea route to Valyria. Euron hoards secrets the way other men hoard jewels, Jon observed. Hell come. Robb volunteered to command the escort, but Ned refused. The North requires its lord. King's Landing demands its marshal. I will go. Arguments flared. Catelyn's eyes flashed with ghosts of lost seasons, but she did not forbid him. She merely said, "Return once more, my love. After that, let younger swords chase the waves." So Ned rode for White Harbor with a company of 200, a mix of Stark guards, Ironborn sworn to Asha, and Free Folk River Marines who had learned sailcraft from Braavosi mentors. Mira Reed came as scout. Davos, reclaimed from Harrenhal negotiations, took the tiller as master of tides. They boarded 5 grain cogs, 1 lumber carrier refitted into false treasure ship, and slipped down the White Knife at dawn under gull cries that sounded remarkably like Bran's laughter. 9 days of deceptively placid sailing carried them past the Fingers, south of Dragonsta's smoking cone, and into the deep blue where the summer sea met the Narrow. Each dusk they lit only shielded lanterns, taught by Davos how to lash canvas to muffle mast creak, how to taste salt and wind for hints of coming storm. On the 10th night the moon vanished behind a scudding scab of cloud. A hush blanketed the convoy, too complete for mortal sea. Then came a tremor, the faintest thump through hull planks, followed by the groan of tarred ropes strained against tearing wood. A sailor shouted. The lookout's warning died in a wet crunch as something massive crushed the foredeck like eggshell. Ned sprinted from his cabin. The false treasure ship's prow reared, suspended upon a monstrous ram sculpted into a kraken's beak. The attacking flagship slid from the gloom, iron scales glistening with whale oil. Along her rails dozens of Ironborn clad in scaled morion helms brandished axes, etched with strange glyphs. Amid them, stood Euron Greyjoy. Leaner than rumor yet bigger in aura. One eye black and depthless, the other painted vivid blue like walker glass. Around his brow coiled a circlet of beaten meteor iron tipped with broken dragon glass, and on his chest he wore a sigil Ned did not recognize. Spiral lines within a circle, echoing Bran's rune but inverted, dark swallowing light. Euron's laughter carried over the clash of steel as his men vaulted aboard. Did you think yourself the only man to taste sorcery, Stark reborn? I have drunk deeper. The sea weeps gifts. Ned met him blade to blade on a tilting deck slick with rain. Ice in Euron's obsidian-hilted arak struck sparks that hissed before they hit wet wood. Around them Stark guards engaged Ironborn in brutal knots. Davos fireships maneuvered, but enemy galleys flanked with uncanny coordination, smashing Dromons aside as if guided by single mind. Mira's net team hurled dragonglass bolas, dropping 2 helms. Yet each time a kraken died, its corpse spasmed and rose again, puppeted by pale kelp entwined like veins. Euron's secret necromancy drawn from abyssal trenches. Frozen seawater crept across planks, frosting belaying pins. Ned felt the mountain ember within his ribs flicker, but here on salt water, it could not blaze as on ice or stone. Still, he summoned what warmth remained, channeling it through ice. The blade glowed dull red. Each swing turned seawater to steam, driving back animated corpses. Yet the deck shuddered as the false treasure ship split mid-keel. Asha's loyalists lit fuses on the pitch casks. Flames raced lines of tar. Euron leaped to a yardarm above, laughing. Burn it, wolf. Fire feeds flame, and flame births storm. He whistled. From the belly of his flagship rose a shape of nightmares. A wyvern skeleton trussed with iron ribs, its wing membranes woven of half-tanned human skin. Sorcerous runes pulsed blue along the bones. Sailors fled as the undead dragon clambered up rigging on ropey sinews of kelp. Go. A shard of ice lodged where its heart should be. The stolen walker spear Ned had shattered at the sigh, reforged by black salt magic. Behold my Leviathan, Euron shouted. Ice and fire wed, answer to the crow's eye alone. The beast launched across gap between ships, wings snapping canvas aside, ripping masts. Its maw gushed brine that froze on contact, entrapping men mid-scream. Ned braced, searching for any guiding weakness. But Davos had seen the fuse reach final barrel. He bellowed to Ned over the roar. Jump! Ned's world widened out. Fireships erupted, a chain of blossoms. First orange, then green, then violet, when dragonglass shards flashed raw magic into flame. The explosion slammed Euron's wyvern mid-flight, shattering bones into ash sleep. Shockwave flung Ned across deck into the sea's frigid clutch. He surfaced gasping amid debris. The false treasure hulk, though aflame, still floated, pinwheeled by currents. No sign of Euron, though his flagship lists afar. Hull rent, ghostly blue lanterns flickering. Mira hauled Ned onto a splintered spar. Davos and half a dozen survivors clung to flotsam. At dawn they staggered onto a shoal where the remaining grain cog had drifted under sail, slackened by flame. The crew hoisted them aboard, set course for Dragonstone, the nearest port still safe. They reached the volcanic isle ragged but alive. Daenerys met them on the beach with Drogon snorting smoke. News traveled faster than tide. Euron was missing, maybe dead. But survivors claimed his flagship sank not beneath waves, but into grayscale fog, swallowed by unseen depths. More troubling, scouts reported pockets of undead sea raiders beaching along Cracklaw Point. Creatures with barnacle-crusted armor, eyes glowing faint blue. Melisandre, summoned from the stone drum chamber where she watched the mountain hearts murmurs, listened and frowned deeper than Ned had seen. The great other lingers in crevices untouched by sun. She whispered, Bran's roots reach far, but oceans are old, and light sinks slowly through salt. Daenerys turned to Jon, arriving the next night astride Regal. We must seal the sea, as we sealed the wall. Jon eyed the black water, glimmering moonlit. Water cannot be mortared. but maybe it can be boiled. A bold plan formed. Awaken the western fissure of Dragonmont completely, letting magma flow undersea across the Narrows floor to create a curtain of hardening basalt. 10 island chains steaming like a fiery necklace. Not an impenetrable wall, yet too hot and chaotic for undead fleets to cross. It risked reshaping coastlines, but survival demanded extremes. Davos argued sailors' lives would be ruined. Tyrion pointed out new land meant new farms, new ports. Stannis simply nodded, jaw set. The debate ended when a drenched watchman burst into council chamber. Undead corsairs had stormed the lonely tower of Massey's Hook, slaughtering the garrison, piling skulls into spiral cairns. Spiral. Again the symbol reversed from Bran's bark. The decision became iron. For 7 days miners deepened lava channels inside Dragonmont. Daenerys and Drogon dived into vents, carving tunnels of vitrified glass with white-hot breath. Melisandre and Thoros recited counter-chants to keep flow stable. Jon, the living conduit, stood upon basalt dais each dawn, directing magma's path with gestures that glowed violet along his veins. Ned served guard in council, pacing tunnels, remembering the chill of the lake at the sigh and willing its opposite force now. On the 8th day the mountain belched a lake of fire that cascaded into the sea, hissing clouds towering like war banners. The narrow seethed, currents convulsing. Fish leapt boiled, sailing charts redrew themselves in hours. But when smoke cleared, a ragged archipelago of steaming rock jutted between Dragonstone and Crackclaw. No ship, living or dead, could pass without charring to cinders. Yet, victory again cost. The eruption ruptured tunnels near the stone drum, trapping Thoros beneath collapse. He perished with prayer on his lips, beard alight, eyes reflecting the fire he worshipped. His death broke something in Melisandre. The ruby at her throat dulled. She retreated inland, claiming she must speak with shadows none else could see. Ravens arrived from Old Town. Euron's body had washed on a desolate shore, wrapped in chains of kelp, eyes and mouth, sewn shut with thread of silver algae. But the corpse vanished between tides, snatched perhaps by loyalists or dragged by currents to darker deeps. Asha Greyjoy sailed to treat with Daenerys. She wept no tears for her uncle, yet she warned his cult of Stormcrows had seeded doubt among the Isles. They wore his spiral sigil, claiming the crow's eye would rise as storm made flesh. While charts turned brittle from new ink, the realm pressed on. Autumn neared. Harvest wagons rolled north and south unmolested. The charter's snow courts convened in Riverrun, Lannisport, Gulltown, adjudicating land disputes with surprising civility. Widow Steepens reached remote hamlets thanks to Sansa's tireless road network. The rebuilt Watch accepted recruits from every kingdom. A Stormlander bard, seeking atonement for wildling raids he once sang for pay. 2 Dornish spear maidens who preferred mountain snow to desert sand. A former Lannister sellsword missing a hand, but teaching archery with the other. Jon visited monthly, leaving Rhaegal to nest atop Nightfort's new flame beacon, a living sentry. Yet Ned sensed another ripple of unrest. Dreams came, black rivers coiling around weirwood roots, suffocating leaves. Bran's whisper, once bright, now reached faint, as though traveling through thicker wood. He wrote Mira, now captain of the Royal Scouts, to trace streams near Skagos, rumored to run brackish despite fresh snowmelt. Her return raven spoke of oily slick smelling of rot, of children of the forest in hiding, their caves tainted by salt shadows. Word reached them next that septons in the Reach found wells fouled overnight, spirals of crushed shell swirling in buckets. Farmers in the Neck discovered frogs with dead blue eyes thrashing in reed pools. These were not armies, but omens. Daenerys, hearing Mira's report in the solar of Maegor's tower, now gutted, open to sky. Sighed. Villains seldom die clean in legend, she said. They leave curses to haunt the land. Tyrion closed a ledger. Then we must become ghostbreakers as well as lawgivers. A council assembled at Winterfell to chart the final cleansing. Jon, Daenerys, Stannis, Asha, Robb, Bran through Raven, one perched on the table's edge, eyes milky then sharp. Bran told them the sea roots were poisoned by fragments of the ice spear fused to Leviathan's heart. When it exploded, shards melted into currents, each a seed of the great Elver's will. Unless these shards were found and quenched in living fire, they would worm through water into every river, birthing pockets of undeath. In decades the realm would face not marching corpses, but seas that refused to yield fish, wells that birth wraiths, winter without snow, a famine of souls. How many shards? Jon asked. 7. Bran's raven croaked. 1 for each kingdom. Scattered by tide, Daenerys straightened. Then 7 riders must hunt. 7 fires must be lit. Fire to match water, knights of flame against ghosts of salt. They cast lots, and none refused the burden. Ned Stark would sail to Skagos' black tide pools. Jon Snow and Rhaegal to the Iron Islands' Maelstrom Gate. Daenerys and Drogon to the whirlpools off Shipbreaker Bay. Asha Greyjoy to the smoking sea beyond Valyria's ghost coast, seeking any shard drawn by geomantic pull of Dragonstone ruins. Robb Stark to the swamps of the Neck where Frogspawn turned blue. Emira Reed inland to the mirror lakes of the Riverlands. Lyanna Mormont, fierce but chosen by the Raven, to the shivering sea fjords east of Bear Island. Stannis demanded assignment, but Bran insisted his flame had anchored Dragonstone. Moving it would leave the wall of basalt unstable. Begrudgingly, the king remained to rule. Each quest unfolded like a separate epic, spun by unseen fates. Ned's ship, the Nan, wrecked on Skagos' knife-edge cliffs. He traversed goat tracks to a fissure where seawater steamed green. There he battled pale crabs grown to dog size around a core of pulsing ice glass. Using dragonglass tongs heated red, he plucked the shard and quenched it in a brazier of pitch atop the island's lone watchtower. When it cracked, the crabs died instantly, shell collapsing to sand. Jon faced a whirlpool that sang of drowned kingdoms. He dove on Rhaegal's back, eyes stinging salt. At the maelstrom's heart floated a crystal sliver lodged in ribcage of a giant squid. Longclaw sliced sack and drew free the glass. Rhaegal seared it mid-air, the whirlpool calmed to spinning foam. Dead squid sank. Daenerys and Drogon found their shard inside a cavern, accessible only at knee-up tide, nestled within polished basalt, like a cursed pearl. Drogon's flame turned sea fog to rainbows, and the shard melted into molten tears that dripped into fissures, sealing them with glossy obsidian. Shipbreaker's storms eased the next dawn. Asha braved Valyria's smoking arches, guided by mosaic clues left on shattered plazas. She speared her shard inside a leviathan skull half fossilized. The eruption created a waterspout of red steam that hurled her longship a league seaward, yet the smoking sea's pall lightened after. Robb waded waist-deep through the bogs, aided by crannogmen singing low dirges. He found his shard hung in web of strangler vines around a cypress heart, beating like a second sun. He buried it under river mud, still warm from dragon-thewed iron pot he lugged days across peat. The shard hissed. Catfish rose belly up, then flipped. Alive again, swimming free. Meera tracked her shard to a mirror lake, turned glassy black. It lay inside a hollow stone idol older than first men. She used frog spear and cunning, leapt from reed mat to idol's mouth, wrestled gnarled roots, pulled free the shard with a cry half triumph, half grief, for Jojen. She burned it with oil, and wind rippled the lake into clear reflection once more. Lyanna Mormont led 3 longships over gray waves. A storm of sleet battered them. Whites of drowned ice bears clambered aboard. She slew one herself with a spear of dragonglass tied at both ends, and roared until her voice cracked. The shard they sought floated inside an iceberg, shaped uncannily like a crescent moon. She rammed her vessel's prow, cleaved it, seized the shard, then plunged it into a brazier, hauled up the mast. Flame mushroomed blue-green. The iceberg calved and sank, releasing fish that glowed briefly, then returned to normal shimmer. When the 7th fire kindled, Bran's raven burst into Winterfell's hall at midnight, eyes blazing gold. The raven spoke clear in front of dozens. Balance returns. Then it shook feathers, turned mundane, and flew to roost above the hearth. Melisandre, emerging from self-imposed vigil, bowed before it, whispering, "So passes shadow into light." Her ruby gleamed again, faint but steady. "Oh, Kate. Years turned. Children born during war now toddled along Wintertown's new stone sidewalks, chasing copper butterflies forged by tinkers' guilds from melted swords. The Watch's rebuilt fortresses dotting the wall lit beacon braziers nightly. But those flames were signals of guardianship, not alarm. Trade flourished along newly dredged Blackwater. The canal denaries carved between the Mander and the Honeywine cut carriage costs in half. At Harrenhal, where once Lord screamed, now scholars gathered annually for Assembly of the Seven, debating policy, reading harvest tallies, performing dramas of the long night to remind folk how close they had skirted oblivion. Sansa directed these plays, pairing mummers with septon choirs. Her show, The Direwolf and the Phoenix, traveled as far as Pentos, telling of Ned's resurrection and Bran's sacrifice. Some said the Prince of Pentos wept. Jon and Daenerys wed beneath the heart tree, transplanted to the newly greened dragon pit in King's Landing. Grey Wind and Ghost flanked the Isle. Drogon crouched upon the hilltop like a living mountain, rumbling approval. Their vows pledged reign not as monarchs of absolutes, but as stewards of charter law. Afterward they flew north for a season, building a rookery at Castle Black where dragon hatchlings could imprint on both ice and fire. Eddard Stark walked the ramparts while dawn scattered rose gold over Winterfell, and thought of all those absent. Lyanna his sister, gone but living in Jon's melancholy smile. Benjen vanished in snows but perhaps at peace. Bran, now the unseen warden speaking through rustle of leaves, and countless nameless souls, whose ashes fed the soil for these calmer crops. He visited their resting stones often, brushing frost from names. Speaking lines of charter he had memorized like prayer. Mira Reed joined Citadel scholars, writing yellow leather volumes about Green's Ear lore, so no king could again twist prophecy. She refused chains but wore a bracelet of weirwood beads Bran had once carved. Robb and his piper lady bore twins, Rickon and Winifred, who wrestled in fresh straw while Grey Wind pretended ferocity, then licked their faces. Lyanna Mormont became mistress of ships for all northern coasts at 17. Her fleet of ice-ram schooners patrolled every inlet. Asha Greyjoy oversaw Iron Isle's refineries forging windwheel pumps that drained brine pools to reclaim arable land. Her people ate more barley than salt in those days. Cersei faced trial by council and populace both. She was found guilty of crimes against realm and gods. Yet Ned spoke for mercy, reminding the Assembly of Charter Article 10, no life to be taken in vengeance where secure confinement could suffice. She was sentenced to live out her days tending the Silent Sisters in a ruined sept, overlooking Blackwater, binding wounds of soldiers she once maimed. Some said she sneered, others that tears fell when she changed a dying girl's bandage the first time. One crisp afternoon, Ned received a carved box, delivered by a Braavosi merchant. Inside lay 3 acorns of deep violet hue, a new species found sprouting amid cooled lava of the basalt chain. A letter from Tyrion. A reminder that from fire and peril, roots take hold. Ned smiled, pressed an acorn into Winterfell's godswood soil. He wondered whether Bran would guide its growth into some marvel centuries hence. As the 15th harvest after the long night ripened into swaths of gold, the Great Council invited Ned to Dragonstone to witness the first moot of coastal princes charting fishery laws. He traveled south on Asha's fastest schooner, now steam-assisted by dwarven gyres. The trip took 5 days instead of fortnight. As they neared the volcanic isle, smoke plumes rose, soft, benign, a hearth's exhale. Drogon circled overhead, wings throwing scalloped shadows across deck. Ned craned his neck, marveled still. Daenerys greeted him on the beach. Behind her, the basalt wall they'd birthed glimmered, no longer steaming, but draped in green where lichen had found crannies. "You come as elder statesman," Daenerys teased, eyes bright. "Have you prepared a speech on merits of fair catch quotas?" Ned chuckled. "I shall quote Tyrion. Something about ugly men and big fish. But I travel mainly to rest old bones by warm seas. They climbed to the summit terrace where stone benches overlooked churning sapphire water. John stood there, hair touched with first gray, regal napping below. He embraced Ned, gaze crinkling. The watch sends word. Births among free folk are higher than ever. Raids non-existent. They ask permission to build a trade tunnel under the wall instead of over. Granted, Ned said. Let each generation find easier ways to walk together. They spoke until sun bled into horizon. When dusk deepened, a hush fell. Even wind paused as if waiting. Then, from the basalt chain, tiny orange flares winked into life. First one, then a score, then 100. Fishing skiffs anchored along the new isles had lit lanterns in unison. A ribbon of fire tracing the shape of their improbable wall. I did not order that, Daenerys murmured. It's the fishers' Thanksgiving, Jon said. Each lantern for a life saved when storms break against new rock Todd. Ned watched the lights shimmer. They reminded him of Bran's violet veins of Wallfire's first burst, of dawn glinting on a battered sword the day he rose from pyre. Life, he thought, was a braid of such flames, some violent, some gentle, each handing its spark onward. Behind them came Melisandre, older now, hair threaded with snow-white strands. She carried no staff, only a smile softening sharp cheekbones. The Lord of Light, she whispered, requires no temple while hearts remember. She looked to Ned. Will you finally accept you are more than man? I will accept, Ned answered, that I am man enough to serve until breath fails. She inclined her head. Perhaps that is greater. Night settled. Stars bloomed across sky, mirrored by lantern chain, by dragon eye embers, by the fire still glowing in Ned's chest. He realized then that story had no real end, only passages of calmer prose between storms. Though threats would rise in other forms, drought, greed, the restless stir of far-off empires, this realm would face them, not as a scattered chorus of solos, but as woven harmony. And should the melody drift, voices would recall charter lines engraved into flagstones, hearts would hear Bran's rustling leaves, and fire would answer, as always, the call of ice. Ned inhaled salt, smiled at distant memory of a boy chasing snowflakes. He turned to Jon and Daenerys. Come, he said. Let us write tomorrow's chapter by living tonight. They walked down toward the banquet tents where fisherfolk sang shanties blending Valyrian refrain with stark dirges, where children danced between trestles heavy with crab fritters and lemon cakes, where lords and small folk mingled without barrier of dace or fear. Above them dragons dozed, unswayed by human revels, yet warmed by them nonetheless. And all around, the sea murmured, not threatening, not mournful, just the lullaby of a world still turning, still bright, still brimming with promise that even the sharpest winter could not wholly steal away,